Chapter 37. Virginia was a little excited. According to the name, this was a movie with a woman as the main character. With Eric's current fame, if she could play the female lead, she would receive a lot of attention regardless of whether the movie turned out to be good or bad. Eric, you're saying, I. The expectant gaze of the woman in his arms made Eric feel a little guilty. I'm sorry, Virginia. Your temperament isn't suitable for this movie. In my mind, the female lead should have a pure temperament and a bit of sexiness. As if she didn't hear Eric's words, Virginia said, Eric, perhaps we can find a room to discuss the script. I believe that I have the ability to play the role you mentioned. For a moment, Eric really had the impulse to agree to Virginia's suggestion. However, he was a mature man with strong self-control. He knew that if he agreed to Virginia's suggestion and found a room to discuss, she would have to play the female lead. Although it wasn't uncommon to be ruthless in the industry, he wasn't that kind of person. Furthermore, his foundation was shallow. If he went back on his words, it would be troublesome for him if the woman turned against him. Taking a deep breath, Eric gently pushed Virginia away again. Virginia, I'm really sorry. Although Home Alone and Back to 17 have been successful, many people still doubt my ability. I can't afford failure. If there's a suitable role for you in the future, I will definitely consider you first. The last promise was dispensable. Seeing that Eric wasn't moved by her biggest bargaining chip, Virginia admired this boy's self-control and didn't continue to pester him. After the dance, when the two separated, Virginia still left Eric a name card. What's wrong? Are you still reluctant to part with her? Druid appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Eric's arm as he teased him. Of course. I'm a normal man. Eric smiled. Then you can go to her. I'm sure Virginia won't refuse you. Eric shrugged. But there's a price to pay. I'm poor now. My net worth is $521.75. I can't even afford a luxury suite in a hotel. Drew used his little tongue to lick his lips and rubbed against Eric's body. Eric, there's something here that doesn't cost anything. Eric couldn't help but knock on Drew's head again. You're just a little imp who thinks too much. Bad review return. Drew groaned in pain and rubbed his head. Eric, I strongly object to you always hitting my head. If you do this again, I'll bite you. I'm serious. While they were fooling around, James Brooks walked over with a glass of red wine. Hey Eric, how did your talk with Mr. Barry Diller go? Not bad. We have reached a preliminary agreement. For the next year, the movies I produce will be distributed by Fox. James raised his glass and said, Then congratulations, Eric. I believe your cooperation with Fox will be very pleasant. Eric took a glass of red wine and raised his glass. I also hope so. After taking a sip, James said, Eric, come with me. I'll introduce you to some people in the circle. They also want to meet you. It's my pleasure. Eric happily followed James to the crowd. Drew, who was beside him, suddenly thought of something. He rolled his big eyes and hurriedly followed. This is Mr. Richard Zanuck. He used to be the producer of Spielberg's Jaws. Eric raised his glass and said, Hello, Mr. Zanuck. Richard Zanuck was in his 50s. He was thin and his face was somewhat fierce. At this time he showed a kind smile. Hello, Eric. Nice to meet you. Oh, and little Drew. In the blink of an eye, you have become a big girl. Don't mess around in the future. You should learn more from Eric. At this moment, Drew acted like an obedient girl and said, I will. Mr. Zanuck, may I propose a toast to you? Of course. The other party replied. Drew raised her glass, but inside it was a glass of juice. The girl seemed to have just discovered it, and embarrassedly said, Oh, I forgot I can't drink now. Eric, can you replace me? Eric nodded with a smile. He clinked glasses with Richard Zanuck and drank the rest of the red wine in the glass. After chatting for a while, James led Eric to other people. These are the contacts that may be useful in the future, so Eric cheered up and chatted with the other party. Therefore, he didn't notice that Drew always used various methods to make him drink more wine. After walking half a circle, Eric finally found that he drank too much. He rushed to the bathroom and vomited. When he came out, he was dizzy and on the verge of collapse. Seeing this scene, James had to temporarily give up introducing other people to Eric. Eric, you are drunk. Let's call it a day. There will be opportunities in the future. I will let someone send you back. Mr. James, let me send Eric home. Drew quickly said. Drew stuck to Eric for the whole night. James subconsciously thought that Drew was Eric's girlfriend. He didn't realize anything wrong and nodded. Okay, Drew. Remember to let Eric drink more water. Drew nodded and found a waiter. The two of them helped Eric to the parking lot and Eric's car. Miss Drew, do you need me to send you back? The waiter asked politely. Drew nodded and handed the car key to the waiter. She opened the back door. Eric had fallen asleep in the back seat. Drew sat in the back seat and used her strength to lift Eric's head and put it on her lap. She told the waiter Eric's address. The waiter nodded and started the car. After paying the tip and sending the waiter away, Drew let out a soft cry of joy and quickly returned to his bedroom. You can't run away now. Chapter 38. Early in the morning, Jennifer Aniston hummed an unknown tune and happily busied herself in the kitchen. After meeting with her father's producer friend last night, it was completely confirmed that she would be playing the second female lead in a popular NBC TV series. Although it wasn't the female lead, it was still quite good for a newcomer like her. And this TV series could bring her a certain amount of fame, which was what Jennifer Aniston needed the most right now. Good morning, Jen. Her half-brother, Alex Jennifer Aniston, was still in a daze from waking up in the morning. He scratched his head as he walked through the kitchen door in a daze and casually greeted her. Jennifer Aniston turned her head and said to Alex while carrying a packed breakfast, Hey Alex, breakfast is ready. You can eat it when Dad and the others wake up. I have something to do, so I'm going out first. After saying that, without waiting for Alex to respond, Jennifer Aniston pushed open the door and left in a hurry. After rejecting Eric's invitation to the cocktail party, Jennifer Aniston had been feeling a little uneasy. Although the tabloid story about her relationship with Eric made her very depressed, her love for Eric made her quite concerned about her boyfriend's feelings. Last night on the phone, she heard Eric's depression, so she thoughtfully prepared a breakfast of love early in the morning to appease her boyfriend's dissatisfaction. At the same time, she couldn't wait to share the good news of her role with Eric. More than 10 minutes later, Jennifer Aniston got out of the taxi in front of Eric's house. She took out the key that Eric had specially made for her and opened the door to walk into the yard. She didn't notice that in an inconspicuous gray Buick more than 10 meters away, a white man who was originally a little sleepy instantly woke up. His face was filled with ecstasy as he quickly grabbed the camera next to him and pressed the shutter. At the same time, he fiercely kicked his sleeping companion awake. Hee, David, wake up. There's a good show to watch. The fat black man, who was sleeping soundly with a wide-brimmed hat on his face, was suddenly attacked. He reflexively took off the hat on his face and straightened his body. He stared out of the car window with bloodshot eyes from staying up late. Wayne, did Eric Williams and Drew Barrymore come out? Where are they? It's even more exciting than that. Just now, Eric's girlfriend from the convenience store went in. Haha, this is going to be interesting. The fat black man named David looked around again but didn't see Jennifer Aniston. He reached out to grab Wayne's camera, but Wayne quickly stopped him. What are you doing? Be careful not to expose the film. If that happens, we'll have wasted the whole night. Don't worry, I've already taken photos. That's good, that's good. David rubbed his chubby palms and grinned. I thought we could make a lot of money by taking photos of Eric Williams bringing Drew home for the night. I didn't expect there to be something even more exciting. We're rich now. Wayne, how much do you think we should ask for this time? At least $3,000. If that old guy Santos lowers the price again, we'll change to another newspaper. Anyway, we won't have to worry about not being able to sell this news. The girl opened her eyes. Her long eyelashes blinked a few times, and she stuck out her little head. Good morning, Eric. Ah. A familiar and unexpected baby face suddenly appeared in front of him. Eric was surprised and quickly dodged the girl's red lips. The movement was too big, and his head felt dizzy. Gently rubbing his temples, Eric asked at a loss, Drew, why are you here? Drew seemed to be frightened by Eric's sudden move. Eric, you brought me home last night, and then. Don't worry, I don't mind. I'm very happy. I mind. The two were fooling around. Jennifer Aniston stood at the door with a plastic bag in her hand. Silence. It was as if God suddenly pressed the pause button on the remote control in his hand. After more than 10 seconds, the sound of a car horn came from outside the window, and the three finally reacted. Grievance, discomfort, anger, sadness, disappointment. A series of emotions mixed together, and Jennifer Aniston felt an inexplicable sense of relief. Things should be like this? Erica, I brought you breakfast. Jennifer Aniston's voice was a bit soft, as if a gust of wind could blow it away. Jennifer Aniston bent down and put the plastic bag on the floor. Then she turned around and left. Her footsteps unconsciously became faster and faster. Her high heels stomped on the floor fiercely, making clacking sounds that echoed in the somewhat empty house. The moment her tears fell, Jennifer Aniston had already rushed out of Eric's courtyard. She couldn't let him see her cry, or this bastard would be even more proud. The clacking sounds of high heels completely woke Eric from his daze. And listen to me. Eric hurriedly pushed away Drew, who was still wrapped around him, and hurriedly put on his trousers and rushed out. Because he was in such a hurry, he almost missed a step when he went down the stairs. Fortunately, Eric grabbed the staircase railing in time and rushed out of the courtyard in a sorry state. He could only see a big yellow taxi driving away, and Jennifer Aniston's back vaguely visible in the car. Eric, who hurried back to the house to get the car keys, wanted to cry but had no tears. How many times had it been? Caught in the act again. Why did he use the word again? In Friends, Rachel caught her boyfriend in the act. In his previous life, she caught Pitt and Julie in the act. I've already transmigrated, and yet I still can't stop. I'm doing it again. This kind of talent is too torturous. Can't I just give up? When he drove out, the taxi was already out of sight. Eric could only drive to John Aniston's house in Beverly Hills. Tens of minutes later, after tidying up his clothes, Eric pressed the doorbell of John Aniston's house. Hello, Eric, are you looking for Jen? Jennifer Aniston's half-brother opened the door and recognized Eric. Eric anxiously asked, Alex, where's your sister? Alex. Jennifer Aniston was puzzled. She went out early. Wasn't she looking for you? Seeing that Alex's expression didn't seem to be lying, Eric said goodbye and hurriedly turned to leave. Since Jennifer Aniston didn't come back, it was very likely that she had gone to her rented apartment in Burbank. He knocked on the door of Jennifer Aniston's apartment, but there was no response. Eric looked around. Seeing that there was nobody around, he took out a spare key from the flower pot next to the door and opened the door. The moment he walked into the apartment, Eric keenly sensed that Jennifer Aniston had come back. There was still Jennifer Aniston's unique fragrance in the air. Looking around, he finally found a note on the coffee table in the living room. Eric, let's break up. Heaving a sigh, he hurried back to John Aniston's house. It was still Alex. Jennifer Aniston who opened the door. Alex, you. Before Eric could finish, Alex. Jennifer Aniston cut him off. Eric, you can go. Jen said that she went to New York early and asked us not to tell you. Well, sometimes having a low IQ was a good thing. Is it Eric? Please come in. While Eric didn't know how to answer, John Aniston's voice came from the house. Alex heard his father's words and was somewhat dissatisfied as he stepped aside to let Eric in. Come with me. John Aniston glanced at Eric expressionlessly and turned to walk inside. Eric nodded to John Aniston's current wife in the living room and followed John Aniston to the study. Sit down, Eric. Do you want something to drink? Mr. Jennifer Aniston, no need. Can you tell me which airport and went to? I think there are some things that need to be explained. John Aniston glanced at Eric's somewhat messy clothes and asked, Eric, did you attend the cocktail party last night? Well, yes. After the cocktail party, did you and another woman? John, this is a misunderstanding. John Aniston waved his hand and said, You don't have to explain to me. I just think that it's better for you two to separate. Maybe you don't know, but these days Anne is under a lot of pressure. She always seems a little impatient and restless. Why? John Aniston said. You two have been together for a long time. Don't you know her character? And is a strong girl. You have achieved such dazzling results, but is still unknown. Plus, those words in the newspaper, it's normal for her to have these emotions. Chapter 39. After more than an hour, Eric finally left John Aniston's house. He unwillingly drove to Los Angeles International Airport, but he still couldn't find Jennifer Aniston. He guessed that Jennifer Aniston had already boarded the plane to New York. Through his conversation with John Aniston, Eric understood the pressure Jennifer Aniston had been under these days. He also realized that he had underestimated Jennifer Aniston's competitiveness. Thinking about it, Jennifer Aniston's personality was indeed like that. In his previous life, Jennifer Aniston found out that Pitt had broken the law. Seeing that there was no way to salvage the situation, Jennifer Aniston got a divorce without any hesitation. Compared to those unscrupulous women who wanted nothing more than to empty out the man's family, Jennifer Aniston didn't even ask for alimony from Pitt. Since that's the case, I'll let you go for a while, Eric thought to himself as he drove home. However, he had a headache. The incident with Drew in the morning would probably be difficult to explain. However, Eric had no intention of giving up on Aniston. She was his first woman since his rebirth, and the possessive Eric was determined to get this stubborn girl back, even if he had to resort to some underhanded means. When he got home, he saw Drew dressed neatly and sitting on the sofa in the living room. Eric scratched his head. What should he do with this little vixen who stuck to him without using any means? He definitely couldn't be nice to her. Otherwise, this girl would definitely do whatever she wanted to do. Eric expressionlessly sat down on the other sofa. He picked up a newspaper and started reading it as if no one else was around. Drew saw that Eric had a sullen face and didn't say a word. It was as if she didn't exist. This situation had never happened before. Thus, she felt even more uneasy. Although she had always wanted to snatch Eric away from Jennifer Aniston, she had never thought of using such a misunderstood method to break them up. As a smart girl, she obviously knew that not only would this method fail to snatch Eric away, it would also make Eric hate her. Although the scene in the morning was unintentional, Drew knew that the main responsibility was still on her. Eric's current expression meant that he definitely had a falling out with Jennifer Aniston. In order to break the deadlock, Drew got up and ran to the kitchen. She heated up the breakfast Jennifer Aniston brought over and placed the plate in front of Eric's face. Eric ignored her and continued reading the newspaper. Eric, Mr. Calta Hunter from Forks just called. He wants you to discuss the contract. Aniston's voice. Translator's note. Eric/is Lu Zilong. Crash. Eric deliberately flipped the newspaper. Drew, who was going to sit next to Eric, quickly backed away like a frightened cat. Seeing that Eric didn't react, Drew slowly moved over. Eric, how about, you hit me as long as you don't hate me? Although he already had a preliminary agreement with Barry Diller, it still took a few hours to discuss the details. It wasn't until 3 o'clock in the afternoon that the two sides signed the contract. When Eric left the Fox headquarters, in addition to the contract, he also had a $25 million check in his hand. Jeffrey, can you contact Nicole and the others tonight? I want to have a party at home to celebrate. Of course, it's for everyone. Everyone who participated in the filming of Home Alone has to come. Okay, that's it. After hanging up the phone, Eric went to the supermarket to buy a lot of things. After thinking about it, he drove to Jeff's Italian restaurant, intending to ask a chef to help prepare the party. Just as he pushed open the door and walked into the Italian restaurant, the fat Jeff, who habitually wandered around the restaurant, noticed him. He happily walked over and gave Eric a big hug. Hey Eric, long time no see. You've been in the limelight recently. I watched both of your movies, they were really good. Eric smiled and hugged Jeff. The two of them went to an empty seat and sat down. Julia, 2 cups of coffee. After sitting down, Jeff called out to a girl dressed as a waitress. No problem, Jeff. Mr. Jeff, a female voice answered from behind the counter. Julia? Eric was a little curious. After working at the restaurant for a few months, He knew that there was no waitress named Julia. After he left, Jeff probably hired a new person. He turned his head curiously and saw a tall girl with brown curly hair behind the counter, her back facing the two of them as she busied herself in front of the coffee machine. Jeff followed Eric's gaze and said with a smile, "Julia was hired after you left. She's also an actress. I heard that there's a movie coming out in October." Eric retracted his gaze and asked curiously, "Being an actress should make a lot of money. Why is she working as a waitress?" Jeff said, "For a living. There are thousands of men and women in Los Angeles who dream of being a star. How many are as lucky as you? I heard that her movie was shot last year. Because it's an independent film, it took a year to get the chance to be released. She hasn't received any offers for almost a year, so she can only work at the restaurant temporarily to get by." Eric shrugged indifferently. There were countless independent film companies in Hollywood, and they produced countless independent films every year. It was already quite lucky for a film to be released after a year. Many independent films were shot, but they didn't even have the chance to be released on videotape. They were directly thrown into the warehouse to collect dust. This was very similar to the TV drama market in China in his previous life. At the peak of the TV drama market in China, more than 1,000 TV dramas with a total of 30,000 episodes were produced every year. However, there were only a dozen or so TV dramas that were familiar to the audience. A large number of TV dramas didn't even have the chance to be aired on TV before they were shelved. When Eric heard about this in his previous life, he really wanted to find those tycoons who spent billions on TV dramas every year. He wanted to hug their thighs and shout, "Let's be friends, shall we? Mr. Jeff, and this, sir, your coffee." Eric was chatting casually with Jefferson when the waitress named Julia came over with coffee. "Thank you." Eric reached out to take the cup of coffee. At the same time, he inadvertently raised his head and glanced at the girl beside him. This glance made Eric's hand tremble. The scalding hot coffee splashed out and splashed on him. He took a deep breath and endured the burning pain as he placed the cup of coffee on the table. Eric panicked and pulled out a few napkins to wipe the scalded back of his hand. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." The waitress saw that Eric's skin was red from the scalding and quickly apologized. Jeff glared at the waitress, then turned to Eric and said, "Eric, quickly go to the back and rinse your hand with cold water." Eric nodded and got up to walk to the kitchen. When the other people in the restaurant saw that Eric had appeared in the kitchen, they all came over enthusiastically. The waitress, who was holding a wet towel and wanted to help, stood helplessly outside the crowd. This boy seemed to have a good relationship with her boss, Jeff. She didn't know if Jeff would punish her for scalding him. "Okay, I'm fine. Everyone, go do your own things. Otherwise, Jeff will have a problem with me." In the crowd, Jeff pretended to be angry and said, "Eric, am I such a petty person?" Everyone laughed and joked for a while before dispersing. He followed Jeff back to the hall outside. When the two of them sat down, Eric realized that the waitress was following him like a little tail. Her face was full of nervousness. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eric. I didn't do it on purpose." "Really?" The waitress learned of Eric's name from the way people had addressed him. "It's okay. I was careless just now. Your name is..." Although he was very familiar with that iconic big mouth, he could only pretend to be a stranger. "My name is Julia Roberts," the waitress replied. Chapter 40. Eric nodded and turned to Jeff. "Jeff, here's the thing. I'm holding a party at home tonight and I want to hire a chef and a waitress. That's why I thought of you." It was a profitable business for a restaurant to send a chef and waitress to prepare a party. Jeff was delighted to hear that. "No problem, let Vanessa and Cindy go. Vanessa is fine with the chef. As for the waitress, let this lady do it. Miss Julia, is that okay?" Julia glanced at Jeff hesitantly and nodded. After confirming this, Eric chatted with Jeff casually and wrote down the menu for the night. He worked as a waitress in the restaurant, so he could write down a list of dishes without any introduction. After writing down the menu, Jeff took it and looked at it. He got up and said to Julia, who was still standing on the side, "Julia, come and help me." "Eric, wait a moment, it'll be done soon." Eric nodded. In the kitchen, Julia saw that Jeff was handing the bill to a chef, and had no intention of asking for her help. She asked curiously, "Mr. Jeff, what do I need to do?" Jeff looked Julia up and down. Other than her big mouth and good figure, there was nothing special about this girl. He was even more curious. "Julia, don't you know Mr. Eric?" Julia was a bit confused. "Mr. Jeff, I'm sure I've never seen him before. I've only been in L.A. for a few months." Jeff didn't want to beat around the bush with Julia. "You should know about the kid, right? He's the young director of the kid." Julia's eyes widened instantly. At the same time, she remembered that she had seen a picture of the director of the kid in the newspaper recently, and that he did indeed look like that young man. "You mean that during this time, anyone in North America who hadn't heard of the kid and the young director who had created the miracle had either just returned from Mars or transmigrated to another dimension?" "Yes, that's him. When we were chatting earlier, I casually mentioned that you're also an actor. Originally, Eric only planned to hire a chef, but later he added a waiter and specified that you would be the one to go." Julia Roberts, who hadn't received any offers for nearly a year, covered her mouth when she heard Jeff's words. She looked a little excited. She had participated in many auditions in the past year, but they all ended in failure. No one understood better than her how important it was to have a chance. So, Jeff patted the girl's shoulder. "Grasp this opportunity well, girl. I heard that Eric will be shooting his new movie soon. Maybe you can get a role in it." "Thank you for your reminder, Mr. Jeff." Jeff smiled and waved his hand. He was actually a little selfish. After Eric became famous, the paparazzi dug up his experience of working in his restaurant. This made Jeff's restaurant quite famous in the area, and business improved a lot. If another famous actor could pop up, the restaurant's business would definitely rise to a higher level. "Mr. Eric, can I take your car?" Eric just took out the key to start the car. He thought Julia Roberts would sit in the chef's van behind him. He didn't expect her to run in front of him. "No problem, Miss Julia, please." He casually glanced at the girl who got into the passenger seat and fastened her seatbelt. Julia had already changed out of her waiter uniform and even put on light makeup. She wore a dark red jacket and a pair of light-colored jeans. The tight fabric perfectly showed off her slender legs. Julia Roberts was only 21 years old. Although her appearance wasn't outstanding, she exuded an invincible youthful aura. "You know who I am?" Eric asked casually while holding the steering wheel. Julia, who was thinking about how to strike up a conversation, nodded subconsciously. Mr. Jeff told me." "No wonder." Eric chuckled. Julia curiously asked, "Mr. Eric, no wonder what?" "Miss Julia, I paid you $10 an hour to hire you, but you don't look like you're going to be a waiter. Instead, you look like you're going to a party." Julia looked at her clothes. After she heard Jeff's words, she just subconsciously wanted to leave a good impression on the director, so she hurriedly changed her clothes. I'm sorry, Mr. Eric. I can go back and change back." Eric smiled and shook his head. "No need, it's fine like this. I heard you have a movie released in October?" Julia, who was nervous, quickly replied, "Yes, it's called Modern Cinderella. It's about the love story between three girls who work in a bakery and their boyfriend. The box office is now more than $10 million US. When Julia mentioned the box office of Modern Cinderella, she was a little proud. However, when she thought about the achievements of the young man's movie, her face instantly fell. Although for a low-budget movie like Modern Cinderella, the box office of more than $10 million US was already a small profit, but compared to Home Alone, which was still popular, it was not even qualified to carry the shoes of Home Alone. $10 million US is not bad. Eric did not watch this movie and was not interested. He only knew that this movie was also Matt Damon's first film. Jeff said you haven't received any offers for a year. After this movie, someone will definitely notice you. When it came to this matter, Julia was a little resentful. After Modern Cinderella got a good box office, her agent, who was originally very cold to her, saw her potential and came over again, urging her to arrange some movie auditions for her. However, Julia directly kicked out the agent who hadn't been able to get a role for her in the past year. "Mr. Eric, I heard you are about to shoot your next movie? I only have one thought now. The actors are not confirmed, and the script is not available." Eric nodded and joked. He was also sighing in his heart. What a coincidence. He was just about to shoot Pretty Woman, and the female lead from his previous life appeared in front of him. To use or not to use, that was the question. In fact, Eric's favorite female lead was Sophie Marceau. Other than Sophie Marceau, Eric really couldn't think of a second female lead who could perfectly combine the two temperaments of purity and sexiness. However, this French rose had not yet broken out of the European film circle where art was paramount, and she was not very famous in North America. Whether she would accept his invitation, Eric could only try to find out. As for now, the reason why he hired Julia as an additional waitress was because Eric was thinking about how to win Julia Roberts over. After all, she was the first female lead to enter the 20 million Hollywood salary club in his previous life. She was a true Hollywood star with unquestionable strength. Thinking of this, Eric asked, "Julia, do you have an agency now?" When Julia heard Eric's question, she was overjoyed. She quickly said, "No, I just fired my agent not long ago. Now I can decide on my own matters for the time being." "That's just right," Eric said. "Then Julia, how about joining my agency?" After learning from Barry Diller that Stuart Runkle had signed with CAA, Eric had the idea of starting an agency. He didn't want the stars he made to benefit from others in the future, and then negotiate with him. She thought that Eric wanted to invite her to audition for the movie. If that was the case, Julia would definitely agree without hesitation. However, she didn't expect that it would be an invitation to join his agency. This made Julia a little cautious. She didn't want to waste another year or even longer because she joined the wrong agency. "Mr. Eric, I don't have such plans for the time being. My previous agency didn't give me a job for a whole year. Now I have to work at a restaurant to make ends meet." Eric said, "Don't worry about this, Julia. I can guarantee that I will arrange at least 2 movies for you in the coming year. We can write it in the contract." It seemed that the movie that Julia got an Oscar nomination for, Steel Magnolias, was going to be filmed at Columbia next year. Although he had a bad relationship with Blunt Cohen because of the VM contract, it wasn't a problem to recommend an actress. Columbia couldn't be a monolith. It was nothing more than an exchange of interests. Eric didn't lack things like bargaining chips. Julia hesitated for a while and said, "Can I think about it, Mr. Eric?" "Of course, no problem," Eric said casually. After thinking about it, he added, "Actually, I want to invite French actress Sophie Marceau for the female lead in my next movie. If she refuses, you still have a chance." Julia's hands on her knees clenched. She pursed her lips tightly. It was obvious that she was very conflicted. Her parents and brother were in the entertainment industry. Julia, who knew the industry very well, obviously knew what it meant to be the female lead in Eric's next movie. The boy in Home Alone was now very popular. However, because her parents were in the entertainment industry, she knew that the industry was full of all kinds of lies. Eric's words just now were completely unrelated to promises. At most, it was a bait. If she agreed to join Eric's agency in a moment of impulse, Eric would forget about this sentence in the blink of an eye. She could only cry without tears. Chidian.com welcomes all readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest series on Chidian Originals. Chapter 41. After 6 o'clock in the evening, the crew of Home Alone came to Eric's house one after another. It was completely dark. Eric, who had been discussing things with Vanessa in the kitchen for a while, returned to the living room. He looked around and was surprised to find that in addition to the crew of Home Alone, there were a dozen more beautiful girls in various dresses. "Jeffrey, what's with these girls?" Eric asked curiously when he found Jeffrey Hansen. Jeffrey smiled and said, "It's Nicole and the others. After filming Home Alone, they took on a job shooting a campus comedy. That's when I met these girls. I don't know how they heard that the director of Home Alone was going to hold a party at home, so they came with Nicole and the others. As for the reason, I don't think I need to explain." Eric smiled. These girls were obviously here for him. However, he didn't mind. There were only 2 or 3 women in the Home Alone crew, and the rest were all men. It would be boring if the party was full of men. He walked to the center of the living room and clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. "Everyone, quiet down and listen to me." Everyone in the living room quickly stopped talking and turned to look at Eric. "First of all, I hope everyone has a good night. Today's party is to celebrate the success of the kid in home. This success does not belong to me alone, because without your help, there is no way I could have finished filming The Kid in Home in such a short period of time. Here, I would like to thank everyone once again." As Eric spoke, he bowed slightly to everyone, and everyone in the living room applauded. Eric pressed his hands slightly to signal for everyone to be quiet. He continued, "Of course, just a verbal thank you is definitely not enough. Home Alone has achieved such amazing box office results because of everyone's efforts, so I specially prepared a bonus for everyone. At the same time, I hope that we will have the opportunity to work together again." After Eric finished speaking, he took out a stack of envelopes containing checks and distributed them to everyone with Jeffrey Hansen. Eric had already written his name on the envelope in advance, so there was no possibility of it being sent wrongly. Depending on their positions and other factors, the amount of the check ranged from $200,000 to $500,000. Although it was insignificant compared to the box office of Home Alone, it was equivalent to several years of the crew's salary. After all, they used to work in the small-budget independent film industry, and their annual income was at most a few tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, Eric didn't forget the other actors who had participated in the filming of Home Alone. However, those people would definitely receive more dividends, so Eric planned to pay them after he got his share of Home Alone from Columbia. Perhaps some people would think that since the filming of the movie had been completed and both parties had cleared their debts, why would they still distribute such a large sum of money to others after the box office hit? However, every circle had its own rules, and those who broke the rules would find it difficult to move forward in the circle. After the box office hit, it was one of the rules of the film industry to give dividends to the participants. In Fong's previous life, James Cameron, who had clearly stated that he would give up all the benefits due to the continuous over-budget of Titanic, still received a large amount of dividends from Fox after the box office miracle of Titanic, even though the relationship between the two parties had been so bad that they had forced each other to jump off a building. After distributing the checks, Eric announced the official start of the party, and then pulled Jeffrey Hansen upstairs. "Jeffrey, this is yours. It's enough for you to buy back Firefly." The two went to the balcony of Eric's bedroom on the second floor. Eric took out an envelope and handed it to Jeffrey. The amount on the check was $3 million, but Eric did not feel any heartache. If it were not for the help of an experienced producer like Jeffrey Hansen, Home Alone would not have been completed so smoothly. Jeffrey Hansen took the envelope and rubbed it a few times. Soon, he handed the check to Eric without hesitation. Eric was a little puzzled by Jeffrey Hansen's actions. "Eric, I've thought about it these days. Even if I buy back Firefly without Selena, it's still impossible for me to develop Firefly, so I have a request." Eric smiled and said, "Jeffrey, do we still need to use the word request between the two of us? Please say it." "Eric, you said that you would open a film company. Can I go to your film company to help you? You know, although I'm not good at being a director, I have some experience as a producer." Eric raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had the same idea before. He even thought of taking over all the film crew left behind by Jeffrey Hansen's wife. However, he also felt Jeffrey Hansen's obsession with the Firefly Film Company that he founded with his wife. Moreover, after the success of Home Alone, Eric was confident that it would not be difficult to create a new team, so he did not have the idea of poaching him. Now that Jeffrey had taken the initiative to ask, Eric would definitely agree. "Jeffrey, to be honest, I once thought of asking you to come to my film company to help me, but I thought that you would be reluctant to part with Firefly Film Company, so I didn't mention it abruptly." After listening to Eric's words, Jeffrey's expression did not relax. Instead, he said with some apprehension, "Eric, actually, this is not my main request. I hope that your new film company can also be named Firefly. After all, the original Firefly no longer exists. I know this request may be a bit excessive, but I can help you as a producer in the future. I don't need a single cent of CD, just a salary is enough. I hope you can consider it. Eric then realized that Jeffrey's feelings for the Firefly Film Company that he founded with his wife had not faded. Instead, he wanted to continue some things through him. While being slightly moved by this sentiment, Eric quickly made a decision in his heart. Anyway, he did not care too much about the name of the film company. Originally, he just wanted to use the name Williams Film Company like Disney, Warner, and Fox. Now, a name that was both pleasant to the ear and had an emotional connotation wasn't bad either. Jeffrey, no problem. The new company will be called Firefly Film Company. In fact, I also like this name very much. Jeffrey raised his right hand slightly as if he was still thinking about how to persuade Eric. When he heard Eric's words, he was slightly stunned. Eric, you just said. I didn't hear wrong, right? Of course I agree. Really, thank you so much, Eric. I will work hard for you. Jeffrey did not know how to express his gratitude. He could only open his arms and hug Eric tightly. After Jeffrey let go of him, Eric handed over the envelope with the check again. Okay, Jeffrey, it's just a name. If you had mentioned it earlier, I would have agreed. Now take this. This is what you deserve. Jeffrey still wanted to refuse, but Eric directly stuffed the envelope into Jeffrey's suit pocket. Jeffrey, although the age gap is large, we are still good friends, aren't we? So the matter of the name of the film company was just a request between friends. And this is the fruit of your labor. Forget about the silly words you just said about not sharing. I still hope that you can wholeheartedly help me create the next miracle. Jeffrey finally accepted the check under Eric's persuasion. The two discussed a few more words about the establishment of the film company and the preparation of Eric's next film. Then they returned to the party downstairs. After the news of the establishment of the new Firefly Film Company was announced, the crew members, who originally had different thoughts, rejoiced when they heard the news. After quietly looking at the amount of the check given by Eric, the team, which was built by Jeffrey's wife, became restless. They also knew that Jeffrey wanted to redeem Firefly, so most of them were wavering between continuing to follow Jeffrey in the independent film industry or joining Eric. Now that Eric and Jeffrey made a decision that satisfied both sides, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and the atmosphere of the party became more lively. After chatting with photographer Nick Frank for a while, Eric just turned around with a wine glass in his hand. A girl in a red high-slit dress seemed to have tripped over something and was about to bump into Eric. Stop! Eric quickly shouted with a wry smile. He raised his left hand in front of him and made a gesture to stop the girl in front of him. The girl in front of him with a beautiful golden watermelon hairstyle and a pointy face subconsciously stopped her movements. She stood less than a meter in front of Eric, not knowing what to do. Her small hand holding the red wine unconsciously waved and splashed some wine. At the same time, she had an awkward expression on her face. Miss, if you want to strike up a conversation, you can just greet me directly. Don't bump into me again. I've just changed 2 sets of clothes. If you bump into me again, I'll have to appear in front of everyone shirtless. I'm sure you won't like this scene. The girl, who was originally very embarrassed, heard Eric's slightly teasing words and laughed. Mr. Eric, your words are really interesting. Of course, in order to attract the attention of beautiful girls, I've specially practiced. Eric joked. Then this is? You can call me Lucini, Mr. Eric. Lucini, what a nice name. Let's talk over there. Eric pointed to an open space not far away. In order to get rid of the harassment of the enthusiastic and unrestrained girls at the party, Eric wisely chose a temporary female companion. At the same time, he sighed slightly in his heart. If Jennifer Aniston was here, there wouldn't be such trouble. He didn't know what this stubborn girl was doing in New York at this time. According to the time difference between the east and west of North America, it should be early morning in New York now. Chapter 42. After 11 o'clock, the people at the party started to leave. Eric sent off Jeffrey Hansen, who was the last to leave. When he returned to the living room, he saw Julia Roberts holding a stack of photos and looking through them curiously. These photos were left behind by the group of girls who attended the party today. Speaking of which, these girls were really well prepared. Their personal information was written on the back of the photos, and even some very private information. Eric had struggled at the bottom of the entertainment industry for many years in his previous life, so he could understand these girls' desire to succeed. Therefore, when the girls gave him the photos with some apprehension, Eric didn't reject them and politely said that he would contact them if he needed anything. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to look at these things." Julia saw Eric appear and quickly put the photos back. Eric waved his hand to show that he didn't mind. He walked to the sofa and sat down, picking up the photos and admiring them one by one. "Do you know Julia? Every year, thousands of young men and women come to Los Angeles to pursue their dreams of becoming stars. Among them, less than 1% can get a temporary role in a production team. And those who can become famous movie stars are even less than 1 in 10,000. Eric said this and looked at Julia meaningfully. He continued, "Most people will go back to their hometown after a few years of neglect and return to their original path of life after recognizing reality. This is the best outcome. Those who are still looking forward to the flashy life of the entertainment industry can only be scattered in the crisscrossing streets of Los Angeles, struggling at the bottom of society. Some people will even give up their persistence and gradually sink into the abyss." Julia wasn't stupid. As she listened, she gradually understood that Eric said so much to indirectly explain a fact, and that was the importance of opportunities for actors. This young man seemed to be determined to get her. She was very curious as to why Eric would have such thoughts after only seeing her once. She didn't believe in love and hate for no reason, and she wouldn't feel so good about herself to think that Eric coveted her body. Among the girls who attended the party before, there were a few who were much prettier than her, and they frequently hinted at this young man, but after the party, none of them succeeded in staying. Finally, Julia couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Williams, why me?" "Because I want to." When Julia heard this, she was a little stunned and didn't know how to react. At this moment, there was a sudden cough in the living room. Cough, cough. Another voice suddenly sounded in the room, and the two of them were startled. Eric saw the fat figures, who appeared at the door of the kitchen, and said unhappily, "Vanessa, why haven't you left?" The fat chef, who was holding a box of kitchenware at the door of the kitchen, said teasingly, "I'm sorry, Eric. Although I don't want to disturb you, I just want to ask if Julia wants a ride home. It's very late now." "Yes." Julia had just said a word when she was interrupted by Eric. "No need, Vanessa, you go first. I'll send Julia home." Vanessa didn't seem to see Julia's dissatisfied look at Eric. He blinked knowingly, opened the door, and left with the box of kitchenware. "No one will disturb us now. Let's continue to talk." Eric looked at Julia with a smile. With Vanessa's interruption, Julia completely woke up from the situation just now. She shook her head and said, "But it's very late now. I have to go back. Can you please send me home?" "Okay, before I send you home, I have a suggestion." Eric put away his playful smile and said seriously, "I've thought about it. I'll buy an agency as soon as possible, then give you a good contract and personally arrange your future. I'll turn you into an existence that all the actresses in Hollywood look up to. Julia, what do you think?" All the talent scouts would use the same excuse when they were trying to fool the young men and women who had just started their career, right? Julia listened to Eric's self-righteous words and snorted coldly. "What if I don't want to, Mr. Eric?" Eric didn't care about Julia's cold tone at all. He casually picked up the thick stack of girls' photos next to him and looked down. His voice was a little low, as if he was talking to himself, but there was a hint of temptation in it. "If you don't want to, then I can only say it's a pity. I'll randomly pick a girl from this stack of photos and give her the stage name Julia Roberts. Then I'll arrange a series of box office hits for her, and personally make her famous. I'll send her to the 20 million pay club, and push her to the podium of the Oscar Best Actress. I'll turn her into the one and only big sister in Hollywood for the next 10, or even 20 years. Finally, she'll become a legendary Hollywood woman like Vivien Leigh and Audrey Hepburn. And you, the real Julia Roberts, maybe after modern Cinderella. You'll get a few good roles. Then you'll be popular for a while, and then you'll be quiet. If you're lucky, You'll hook up with a third-rate Hollywood director as your husband before your beauty is about to fade away. Occasionally, you'll get an unknown role in some low-budget movies. Julia wasn't a reincarnated person like Eric, so it was impossible for her to know what kind of glorious achievements she had in her previous life. Plus, after nearly a year of idleness, the complacency she had when she first stepped into the industry had been worn out. She couldn't help but bring herself into the second fate described by Eric. Although her original persistence was on the verge of collapse, Julia still stubbornly mocked. Mr. Eric, if it's really like what you said, that you can easily make a girl reach the level of Audrey Hepburn, then Hollywood superstars are worthless. Do you think you're Steven Spielberg or George Lucas? Of course not. I'm not anyone else. I'm me, Eric Williams, Eric said as he randomly picked a photo from the stack of photos. He looked at the information behind it and said, I think this Julia Roberts is pretty good. What do you think? Julia couldn't help but take the photo. The girl in the photo actually looked a bit like her, but she was prettier than her. She was tall, had blonde hair, and light blue eyes. Julia flipped to the information at the back, unconvinced. The girl was only 19 years old and graduated from the Lee Strasberg Theater Academy in Los Angeles. She had already played supporting roles in 3 movies. No matter what, she seemed to be better than her. A trace of inferiority unknowingly spread out. Eric didn't give the girl more time to react. He continued, Now Julia, it's either heaven or earth. Do you want to take a gamble? Looking at Eric's hateful expression, for a moment, Julia really wanted to throw the photo at his face, turn around and leave. But she quickly suppressed this thought. Although the bright future that Eric described for her substitute made her feel like a joke, when she thought about how the boy in Home Alone was now the hottest child star in America and even the world, Julia hesitated again. Men and women who wanted to break into the Vanity Fair of Hollywood. Which one of them didn't do it for money, fame, and the feeling of being pursued by thousands of people? You promise? Julia tightly held the photo in her hand. After a moment of silence, she looked up at Eric. Their eyes met for less than a second before her eyes quickly drifted away. A victorious smile flashed across Eric's face as he confidently nodded. I promise. Chapter 43. Because of the curtains, the bedroom was a bit dark. Julia Roberts, who always had a stable schedule, woke up from exhaustion. She gently turned over and subconsciously thought that she was going to be late for work. She suddenly sat up, but after a few seconds she let out a soft sigh, relaxed her body and fell back. She looked to the side, but Eric was no longer beside her. After tossing and turning for a while, she put on her jeans and looked around. She took a white shirt from the man's hanger and put it on. She opened the curtains and walked to the balcony. The sun was still shining in Los Angeles, so bright that it was annoying. Julia took a few deep breaths of the cool morning air before she turned and walked downstairs. There was the sound of utensils colliding in the kitchen. She turned her head and saw a man in casual clothes skillfully working in the kitchen. The faint fragrance of oatmeal wafted in the air. Eric also quickly noticed the girl's figure. Julia, good morning. You're already so rich. Why do you still make your own breakfast? Julia leaned against the door frame with her arms crossed. Her tone had a hint of mockery. Eric listened to the girl's words and raised his eyebrows. Looks like I didn't teach you a lesson last night. How dare you talk to me with this kind of tone? Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because we reached an agreement. Eric casually opened the lid and took a look. He turned off the gas switch and said, What if we break up? Then you'll be at a disadvantage. Julia was speechless for a moment. She could only stare fiercely at Eric, as if she wanted to kill the despicable man in front of her with her eyes. Okay, stop staring. I just heard a newspaper delivery guy pass by the door. Help me bring in today's newspaper. Julia stomped her feet like a little girl and turned to walk out the door. Eric glanced at the girls back in the kitchen and revealed a faint smile. The reason why he treated Julia like that last night was because he wanted to plant a seed of obedience in her subconscious. Although she was a woman, after becoming famous in her previous life, Julia's personality was much stronger than many men's. Eric didn't want Julia to completely break away from the trajectory he had arranged for her, and do a messy Brownian motion after she soared into the sky. And if Eric didn't do any defensive work, with Julia's personality, the possibility of that happening was quite high. Julia took a stack of newspapers and returned to the living room. She was too lazy to appear in front of Eric to be bullied, so she sat in the living room and flipped through the newspapers. She flipped through a few copies but found nothing interesting, so she tossed them aside. It wasn't until she flipped to a copy of the Los Angeles City paper that Julia revealed a gloating smile when she saw the title. Late at night, the director of Home Alone and Drew Barrymore returned to their residence. The convenience store salesman's girlfriend left with tears in her eyes. Below the long title was the main text full of gossip, accompanied by clear pictures. What are you looking at? You're not pretty to begin with. Why are you smiling so widely? Eric brought breakfast to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Julia glanced at Eric. This scumbag in front of her doesn't even know that trouble is coming. She handed the newspaper over and walked straight to the kitchen. You should worry about yourself first. I didn't expect you to be such a jerk. You can even bear to hurt such a beautiful girlfriend. Eric took the newspaper and glanced at it. He cursed in his heart. These paparazzi are really everywhere. He read it carefully. The content was 30% true and 70% false. It described how he brought Drew home for the night, and how he was caught by his girlfriend the next day. It was as if the other party's reporter was watching from the side the whole time. After reading it quickly, Eric threw the newspaper on the coffee table and thought about the possible impact of this matter while eating breakfast. Julia, who was carrying a bowl of oatmeal and a plate of bread, returned to the living room. Seeing Eric's unchanged expression, she asked curiously, "Aren't you worried at all?" Eric said without raising his head, "It's just gossip from the tabloids. If I get angry every time I see it, I won't be able to live a normal life. Since I've stepped into this circle, I have to be prepared to bear everything that comes with it." Of course I know that. But didn't you notice that the reporter intentionally or unintentionally mentioned Drew's age? You have to know that Drew is only 13 years old, according to California law. Julia gloated as she raised 3 fingers. At least 3 years, even if the girl is willing. Eric obviously saw the intention of the tabloid reporter. These tabloids always like to fan the flames for sales. However, Eric wasn't worried about this. Instead, there was something else that would be troublesome. Now that there was such a shocking piece of gossip, coupled with the fact that it was already December's prime time, the film companies that had been badly squeezed by Home Alone and Back to 17 would definitely see this as an excellent opportunity to suppress the box office of the 2 movies. Seeing that Eric didn't say anything, Julia naturally thought that Eric was guilty. For a moment, she actually felt a little smug. "Okay, don't be smug. It's as if you'll be better off if I'm unlucky. Wash the dishes after breakfast. I have something to do, so I'll go out first." Eric hurriedly finished eating, picked up his jacket, and said to Julia, "By the way, if I were you, I'd better quit my job at the restaurant and stay at home obediently for the next few days." Julia protested. "Why, you can't restrict my personal freedom." Eric pointed at the newspaper on the coffee table. "Because you'll appear on it tomorrow." Julia didn't know what to do for a moment. "Eric, good morning." Eric had just gotten out of the car when he saw Jeffrey Hansen waiting at the entrance of an agency they had agreed to meet in Burbank. "Good morning, Jeffrey. Let's go in." Jeffrey pulled Eric and said, "Eric, don't be in a hurry. I have something to talk to you about." Jeffrey pulled Eric to a remote corner and took out a copy of L.A. Metropolis Daily from his bag. "Eric, you're a bit too much. Although I've only met her a few times, I think Anne is a good girl. You shouldn't hurt her. More importantly, even if you're looking for a woman, it shouldn't be Drew. She's only 13 years old. If someone doesn't let go of this matter, you'll be ruined. Think about Roman Polanski. After what happened 11 years ago, it'll be difficult for him to return to America." Eric knew that Jeffrey was really concerned about him. He patiently listened to his nagging. When he finished, Eric patted Jeffrey's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Jeffrey. This is just a misunderstanding. Although Drew spent the night at my house the night before, nothing like that happened. Anyway, Jeffrey was still worried. You should be careful, Eric. You've risen too quickly and your performance is too eye-catching. You've already affected the interests of many people. It's hard to say whether or not someone will use some unconventional means to deal with you. I remember seeing an idiom in the East. It's like a tree that grows too tall. Eric listened to Jeffrey's stuttering description and found it very interesting. He couldn't help but use standard Chinese to reply. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. The pile of rocks on the shore will be swept away by the current. Those who are above the masses will not be the same. What did you just say? Jeffrey asked with a strange look in his eyes. Eric sighed. He was too lazy to explain and said casually, "This is a spell I saw in a book. When you encounter something, you can't help but recite it a few times. It can calm your mind." After being joked around by Eric, Jeffrey also felt that he was being too long-winded. He didn't want to dwell on this matter and changed the topic. "Okay, Eric, let's go in. The real estate agent I made an appointment with is already waiting for us." Chapter 44. Gentlemen, these are the office buildings that were selected according to your needs. This one is in the Burbank area, and this one is in the Santa Monica area. Oh, this one is near Hollywood, and the price is relatively expensive. In the lobby of the real estate agency, the real estate agent named Raymond skillfully handed the documents to Eric and Jeffrey. Since they had decided to set up a new Firefly film company, they should first rent an office space for the company, which led to the current situation. The two listened to Raymond's introduction while flipping through the documents and discussing with each other. For some reason, Eric felt that Raymond's gaze towards him was a bit strange, as if he was eager to give it a try. Finally, during a break in the conversation, Raymond couldn't help but ask, "Excuse me, Mr. Williams, are you the young director who filmed Home Alone?" Eric raised his eyebrows. Looking at the other party's expression, he inwardly wondered if this middle-aged man in front of him was his fan. Nodding his head, Eric straightforwardly admitted his identity. "Mr. Raymond, I am. Is there a problem?" Raymond confirmed the doubts in his heart and continued, "It's like this, Mr. Williams. I don't know if you're interested in the Beverly Hills mansion. We just happen to have a mansion at the top of the Beverly Hills mansion. It's about 6,000 square feet and is very close to Sunset Boulevard. It's convenient for transportation and most importantly, it's very private." When he said the last few words, Raymond's expression was a bit unnatural. Obviously, the other party had read the gossip about Eric in the LA Metropolis Daily today, and had the idea of promoting the mansion on the spur of the moment. It had to be said that the real estate agent grasped the timing quite well. Eric was troubled by the pervasive paparazzi, so the agent's promotion was exactly what Eric wanted. Jeffrey on the side also very appropriately said, "Eric, I also feel that you need to change your residence. With your current wealth, it's not safe for you to live alone in North Hollywood." Eric nodded and asked, "Mr. Raymond, if I'm interested, when can we go look at the house?" Raymond was overjoyed and immediately nodded. "We can do it now. The owner has given us full authority over the mansion. The key is with us." Eric wasn't in the mood to pick an office building after hearing that. He left a check for Jeffrey to decide, and then drove Raymond to Beverly Hills. Half an hour later, the two of them arrived at a mansion on Beverly Hills. "This is the place, Mr. Williams." After getting out of the car, the first thing Eric saw was a wall that was nearly 2 meters high. Dense emerald green canopies poked out of the wall. Raymond introduced from the side, "Mr. Williams, take a look. The security of this mansion is quite good. The walls are high enough, and with the dense vegetation inside, it completely cuts off the risk of paparazzi taking pictures. Moreover, there are no street lamps around this mansion. There are 2 gates at the front and back, which is very suitable for a public figure like you." Eric nodded in satisfaction and said, "Raymond, shall we go in and take a look?" "Oh, of course." Raymond hurriedly took out the key to open the door of the mansion, and then turned to the side to invite Eric in first. "Please take a look, Mr. Williams." The main body of the mansion leans towards the modern style. It was designed by Edward Niles Design. There are 4 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and 2 kitchens. The garage can hold 10 cars, and there is an open-air bath outside. There is a pocket-sized basketball court. Oh, right, through the balcony on the second floor, you can overlook the whole of Los Angeles. The scenery of Los Angeles at night is very charming. Eric listened to his agent's skillful introduction and patiently walked around the mansion that was about 600 square meters. Raymond, how much is this mansion? Raymond stared blankly for a moment before a trace of ecstasy quickly surfaced in his heart. Eric wasn't like the other buyers who kept asking all sorts of nonsensical questions. Instead, he directly asked about the price. The success rate of this business was obviously very high. The owner of this mansion had suffered losses in last year's stock market crash, so he had no choice but to put his beloved mansion up for sale. However, the other party wasn't at the end of his rope, and the price he offered was relatively high. Therefore, this mansion had been in the hands of Raymond's real estate agency for nearly half a year. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Raymond maintained his composure and said, $2 million USD, Mr. Williams. Eric's first reaction was that it was so cheap. However, he quickly remembered that it was now 1988, and not the 21st century where housing prices had risen to the point that women were forced to prostitute themselves. It seemed that Michael Jackson's Fantasy Manor, which covered an area of 11 square kilometers, was only $19.5 million US dollars. Clearly, this mansion's price of $2 million USD was a bit expensive. Although Eric wasn't short on money right now, he wasn't a fool. He turned around and stared at the real estate agent and said, Raymond, you also know that I am very sincere in buying this mansion. Therefore, give me a realistic price. $2 million USD is obviously impossible. Raymond revealed a pained expression and said, then $19.5 million US dollars and no less. $1 million. Eric stated his price. Raymond almost jumped up and shouted in astonishment, that's impossible. Right now, it wasn't popular for Chinese to buy property in North America. Therefore, this was the first time Raymond had encountered such a deranged way of haggling. As if he had received a great insult, Raymond straightened his neck and said, Mr. Williams, if you bid like this, then there's no need for us to continue discussing. Eric could see that the other party was really angry. He hurriedly laughed and said, Okay, Raymond, I was just joking. But you are too insincere. It's only cheaper by 50,000 US dollars. Although Raymond was still a bit unhappy, the other party was still a big client. If he sold this mansion, he would be able to get a large commission. Therefore, his expression quickly returned to normal and said, Mr. Eric, the owner of this mansion isn't lacking in money. Moreover, you can have someone appraise it. The entire set of luxurious custom-made furniture and other decorations will cost at least 500,000 US dollars. Therefore, the price is very high. Originally, the other party insisted on 2 million US dollars, but after some persuasion, they agreed to a discount of 100,000 US dollars. Therefore, 1.9 million US dollars is already the cheapest price. After saying this, Raymond looked as if he was waiting for Eric to make a decision. Clearly, there was no room for discussion on the price. Eric thought for a moment. He really did like this mansion. In the end, he nodded and said, Raymond, if I decide to buy it, how long will it take for me to move in? Raymond said, if you can pay the full amount, we can do our best to handle the handover procedures for you. You can move in within 3 days. And if you need a bank loan, it will take a bit longer. Sure enough, this was a country where money was omnipotent. Eric recalled a friend from his previous life bragging about his experience of buying a house in Los Angeles. It took him more than a month to settle it. In the end, Eric chose to pay the full amount. The two of them returned to Raymond's real estate agency. Eric called Edward Lewis Law Firm and had them send over a lawyer familiar with real estate business. He was only responsible for filling out a check, and the rest was left to the private lawyer to handle. Jeffrey Hansen also chose an office building in Burbank as the location for Firefly Films. Eric gave it a look and expressed his satisfaction. Just like that, the matter was settled. After a busy day, he returned home in the evening. Eric glanced around and discovered that the number of paparazzi in the vicinity had increased. These guys were obviously stimulated by the gossip from this morning and wanted to fish out some valuable news from him. With regards to these people, Eric could only helplessly pretend not to see them. After eating dinner and taking a shower, Eric wore loose home clothes and went to his bedroom. After thinking for a bit, he still decided to start writing the script for Pretty Woman. As for the Resident Evil novel that Michael Krauss had urged him to write several times, Eric directly chose to delay it. In any case, he was used to Michael Krauss's urging, and Eric also got used to it. In the following few days, Eric and Jeffrey busied themselves with setting up the film company during the day and writing the script at night. Originally, he thought that the matter with Drew and Jennifer Aniston, even if the media had ulterior motives, would be fiercely hyped up for a few days. In the end, the matter would gradually die down like other celebrity scandals. Who knew that this matter had a tendency to blow up and become more and more obvious? Chapter 45. First, as Eric expected, the Los Angeles City paper exposed the photo of Julia leaving Eric's house again, and specifically mentioned the party held by Eric at home. However, it skimmed over the participation of the cast of Home Alone and focused on the group of young and beautiful women. Then, some newspapers followed suit and found some specious news to criticize Eric's personal conduct. Eric gradually changed from an inspirational young man to a playboy who abandoned his girlfriend after becoming famous, had sex with underage girls, and indulged in extravagant party life. Perhaps Eric Williams is indeed a talented young man, but after obtaining a huge amount of wealth too easily, this young man obviously began to chop it off at an incomprehensible speed. After just abandoning his girlfriend and spending a night with Drew Barrymore, Eric Williams immediately changed to a new woman. According to the investigation, the big-mouthed beauty in the photo is the heroine of modern Cinderella. Even some entertainment gossip newspapers without a bottom line began to fabricate without any basis after they couldn't find any more news. For a time, the good public image that Eric had created was on the verge of collapse. Forks immediately reacted when they noticed that the storm was about to escalate. Back to 17-inch was still in theaters, and they had just bought the overseas distribution rights of Home Alone. If they allowed Eric's image as the male lead and director to be damaged, they would obviously be the ones to suffer direct economic losses. As for Columbia, apart from continuing to fulfill the contract according to the VM agreement, they were almost completely indifferent. Some employees in Columbia's publicity department also mentioned to their superiors that they could do public relations for Eric, but the proposal was not approved. Blunt Cohen was humiliated by Eric last time. The senior management of the publicity department even suspected that Blunt Cohen was behind the storm, so they were not willing to take the risk to stand up for Eric. News Corporation originally started as a print media company and had played a lot of tricks to increase sales by smearing public figures. Correspondingly, it was easy to deal with their own side being smeared. Soon, under the negotiation of Fox and Eric himself, the counterattack was quickly launched. While using various media to reverse Eric's image, Fox skillfully selected a few recently released actors and directors with dirty backgrounds to hype up. For a time, the North American newspapers seemed to be in a mess, and the attention focused on Eric was quickly diverted. The public gradually sniffed out a hint of something unusual from these rumors. Although the media was good at manipulating people's minds, if they really blindly treated the public as fools, they would be the fools in the end. Soon, a little-known Hollywood information daily published a special commentary article on the front page, completely exposing the undercurrent buried under this storm. Christmas farce. It's all because of the box office. The annual movie Christmas season is coming. In the past, the film companies that used all means to promote their own works are using a series of despicable means to suppress their competitors this year. It all started with the miraculous rise of a young man named Eric Williams. After the new week's box office was released, the total box office of the two movies related to Eric Williams has exceeded $100 million, especially the low-budget comedy Home Alone. After the second week's box office rose against the trend, the third week's box office only dropped 20%, earning $15 million. The three-week total box office is close to $80 million, directly entering the sixth place in the annual box office rankings. The momentum of a miracle is unstoppable. As we all know, the total box office and audience during the Christmas season are limited, and the major film companies will withdraw from a series of annual blockbusters. Therefore, in order to compete for the box office share, it is reasonable that Eric Williams himself has been subjected to all kinds of criticism and scandals recently. Let's not talk about Eric Williams's character for the time being, and let's not talk about the series of things that his movie stars have done that have been attacked by public opinion recently. We are just here to call on the major film companies to stay calm and return to the normal competitive track. Suppressing the opponent through abnormal means will only lead to self-inflicted consequences. The Hollywood Information article seemed to be a signal. While the major newspapers reprinted it, the bosses behind the public opinion storm who wanted to beat Eric down had to restrain themselves, because they found that Eric was no longer alone. News Corporation's quick counterattack clearly showed that Eric Williams had formed a stable interest alliance with Fox. Although some tabloids were unwilling to give up on the topic, most of the more influential newspapers tacitly stopped attacking their competitors. The storm seemed to have passed just like that. A few days later, Eric, who was chased by the paparazzi, finally moved into the mansion on the top of Beverly Hills. Closing the door tightly, Eric no longer had to look through the window and see a long line of paparazzi cars parked outside like in the North Hollywood apartment. Jeffrey Hansen looked at the high walls outside the mansion and pressed the doorbell with some envy. After a few minutes, Eric opened the door and welcomed Jeffrey Hansen in. After parking the car in front of the mansion, Jeffrey Hansen asked, "Eric, what have you been doing at home recently? You haven't been out for a few days, right?" Eric was super depressed when he mentioned this. After the procedures of Firefly film were completed, there were not many things that required him to personally appear. Plus, he was chased by the paparazzi when he went out, so Eric basically stayed at home these days. Compared to the happy life of the otaku in his previous life, this era without the internet and smartphones really made Eric, a transmigrator, crazy. Writing novels, writing scripts, watching TV. Anyway, it's very boring. In this situation, I don't even dare to go out. Last time, I just passed by a convenience store and bought a bottle of drink. The next day, the tabloids reported that I extended my claws to the supermarket cashier. Jeffrey couldn't help but laugh out loud at his misfortune. Eric led Jeffrey Hansen into the study on the second floor of the mansion. As soon as he entered, Jeffrey saw a large wooden writing board hanging on one of the walls of the study. Densely packed newspaper clippings and scribbled sheets of paper were stapled to the writing board. "What are these for?" Jeffrey asked curiously as he walked closer to take a look. "It's useless." Eric walked forward and casually tore off a newspaper clipping. He smiled and said, "I was bored at home, so I tried to analyze who was tormenting me behind the scenes from these tabloids. When I become rich in the future, I'll settle the score." Jeffrey joked, "Do you think you're Sherlock Holmes? If you can figure it out with these, then those old foxes would have wasted their time." Eric shrugged. Speaking of which, he was actually quite lucky. Because of Fox's temporary alliance of interests, he was pulled back from the brink of this storm. Compared to Michael Jackson in his previous life, who touched the interests of too many people, but was tormented alone, Eric didn't dare to ask for anything more. Putting these thoughts aside, Eric asked, "Right, Jeffrey, how are things going?" When Jeffrey heard this, he took out a large stack of documents from his briefcase with some resentment. "You're such a carefree boss. You leave everything to me. I'm already renovating the company's office building. It will take about half a month. Also, this is some information on the agency you asked me to find." "Eric, are you really going to buy an agency?" Eric took the documents and said, "Of course. You saw Stuart Runkle's situation. CAA is now holding him tightly in their hands, waiting to extort money from me. I can't always train stars for others. But federal antitrust laws state that film companies can't own agencies at the same time." Eric flipped through the documents in his hands and replied, "Of course I know that. I don't plan to merge the two companies. In my vision, the film company and the agency are completely independent. There won't be any legal problems. Forget it. You do it yourself." "Right, is the script for the new movie ready?" Eric found a stack of manuscripts on the desk full of newspapers and handed them to Jeffrey. "It's done. Take a look first." Chapter 46. After carefully reading the script of Pretty Woman, Jeffrey said with some doubt, "Eric, I still think that this story is too perfect. It's like a fairy tale about a prince and Cinderella. Do you think the audience will like a fairy tale about a prostitute? Even famous literary works like Ball of Suet and La Traviata all have tragic endings." Eric thought to himself, "What I want to write is a perfect fairy tale." The original script of Pretty Woman was actually a black drama called 3000. It reflected the living conditions of prostitutes in Los Angeles through a $3,000 sex transaction between the male and female leads. But during the filming process, because of the sufficient budget, the director and producer repeatedly changed the script, and in the end, it became a romantic comedy. The most surprising thing was that this movie, which was changed beyond recognition, actually received $170 million at the North American box office. This made many male and female stars who refused to act in the original script beat their chests and stomp their feet. At the same time, it also made Julia Roberts famous. In the beginning of the movie, the scene of the prostitute in the alley was filmed according to the original script. Therefore, when the audience in his previous life thought about it after watching the entire movie, they would realize that the scene was incompatible with the romantic style of the movie. "Jeffrey, let's not talk about other things for now. What do you think of Vivian's image in the script?" After all, it was only a written description, and it wasn't shown on screen. Therefore, Jeffrey pondered for a while before saying, "Her personality is straightforward and cheerful. She's a bit vulgar, but it's natural. Even if she's a prostitute, she still has her own perseverance." Eric patiently listened to Jeffrey's long list of thoughts before saying, "Jeffrey, maybe you didn't notice, but when you were describing Vivian, the corners of your mouth were curled up. This means that you don't hate this prostitute at all. You even like her a bit." Jeffrey only subconsciously expressed his feelings towards Vivian, and didn't notice the details that Eric said. "This? I do." Eric nodded and said affirmatively, "Of course. Since you don't hate Vivian, the audience will definitely like this girl after the movie is filmed." Jeffrey nodded, but soon raised his eyebrows in dissatisfaction. "What do you mean you don't even hate me? Am I a harsh person in your eyes?" Eric quickly denied. "Of course not, you're just a little long-winded." Eric smiled and patted Jeffrey's shoulder. "Don't be depressed. Old people tend to be long-winded, so don't take it to heart." Jeffrey gloomily glared at Eric. "All right, you're the boss, and it's been proven that your foresight is much better than mine. Since you've already decided, when should we start preparing?" "Of course, the sooner the better. It would be best if we could complete the preparation and casting work before Christmas and start filming immediately after the new year. This movie is very suitable to be released during Valentine's Day." Jeffrey lowered his head and calculated the time. Valentine's Day is indeed very suitable for this movie. However, Eric, isn't it a little too rushed? Home Alone hasn't even been released at that time. Eric shook his head. "Jeffrey, you've also seen the speed at which I produced Home Alone. So, Charming Lady will take more than a month. We can negotiate with Fox and start the publicity work during post-production. Then, when should we start casting? Do you have a plan?" Eric said, "I've decided to use Richard Gere for the male lead. My first choice for the female lead is Sophie Marceau. Jeffrey, I need you to help me find Sophie Marceau's contact information and send her an invitation. If she doesn't agree, we'll use Julia Roberts. As for the other supporting roles, we'll talk about it after we acquire the management company. Some of the supporting roles in the movie are quite outstanding. We can't let outsiders take advantage of them." "Eric, Sophie Marceau, Sophie Marceau. Is this how you're going to fight? She's that French actress, right? Of course, it's the one who acted in First Kiss. Sophie Marceau's image is very compatible with Vivian's. I just don't know if she'll accept the invitation. After all, you should have heard some things about her." "All right, I'll send out the invitation as soon as possible. If she refuses, Eric, I think Meg Ryan is also not bad. As for Julia Roberts, she's the waitress who appeared at your house that night. She looks a little. Isn't it a little inappropriate?" In his memory, Meg Ryan belonged to the generation of American sweethearts before Jennifer Aniston. Eric recalled some of her movies, such as the famous Sleepless in Seattle. Her image was indeed not bad. However, since he had already decided to make Julia famous, and with the factors from his previous life, Eric certainly wouldn't give the opportunity to others. Jeffrey, trust me. It's decided. I have my own reasons for choosing Julia Roberts. Oh right, contact the boss of this SID agency, Capel SID, as soon as possible. Jeffrey took a page of information from Eric and looked at it. Eric, Capel SID is indeed very capable. I heard that he single-handedly handled a few A-level projects in CAA 2 years ago. However, he had a conflict with Michael Ovitz and was kicked out by CAA. CAA has a lot of power in the entertainment industry now. It's better if we don't deliberately anger Michael Ovitz. Eric sneered in his heart. He had always been unhappy that CAA signed Stuart Runkle so quickly. Although Michael Ovitz was now called the most powerful person in Hollywood by some media, CAA could only be powerful for another 5 or 6 years. In the second half of the 90s, CAA would still monopolize a lot of star resources, but in front of the gradually forming media companies, it wouldn't be as powerful as before. Moreover, compared to CAA, it was still a small fry. It didn't matter if he offended it or not. Although CAA monopolized a lot of superstars, Eric was confident that he could create a superstar himself. Then it's decided, Jeffrey. We're still small fry. CAA can't be bothered with us. Jeffrey shrugged helplessly. Okay, as you wish. After persuading Jeffrey to stay for lunch, Eric was about to go to the study to write Resident Evil. Suddenly, the phone in the living room rang. Hello, is this William's house? Eric picked up the phone but slightly moved the receiver away from his ear. He had already received a few harassment calls in the past few days. One guy even started cursing as soon as he picked up. It was so loud that Eric's eardrums were a bit numb. Eric even considered changing his number. The other person was silent for a while. Eric thought it was another harassment call. Just as he was about to hang up, a voice came from the receiver. Hello, Eric. When Eric heard that familiar voice, he leaned against the sofa with the phone in his hand. Hi, Anne. I've been wanting to explain what happened that morning. There's nothing going on between me and Drew. I was dead drunk that night. It was purely that girl Drew who was messing around. This has nothing to do with me. We've already broken up? In an apartment building in Manhattan, Jennifer Aniston was stuttering as she listened to Eric's hurried explanation. It was obvious that she was struggling in her heart. At the same time, she was a bit resentful of the slow guy on the other end of the line. On the third day of her arrival in New York, Drew somehow found her contact information and explained the situation to her. As for that despicable guy on the other end of the line, he didn't come to find her or contact her for so many days. If it wasn't for an important matter today, Jennifer Aniston swore that she wouldn't take the initiative to contact that bastard for the rest of her life. If Eric knew what Jennifer Aniston was thinking, he would definitely cry out that he was wronged. Ever since that day, a series of things happened one after another. Eric was mentally and physically exhausted. Even now, he didn't dare to casually go out. How could he have the energy to deal with this matter? Chidian.com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chidian Originals. Chapter 47. Eric said firmly. And I won't break up with you. Can you tell me your address in New York? I'll visit you on Christmas Day. Don't even think about it. Jennifer Aniston refused with a straight face. At the same time, she couldn't help but think. Can't you find her yourself? Even Drew Barrymore could find her. Don't you have a new girlfriend? That big-mouthed girl? You mean Julia? She has good potential. I'm going to open a management company and want to sign her. Jennifer Aniston glanced at the tabloid on the table not far away with dissatisfaction. Do all the actresses in your management company have to sleep with you? I've also worn that shirt before, you bastard. After hesitating for a few seconds, Eric said softly, I'm sorry, Anne. Can you forgive me? I promise I won't do it again. Hearing the rare weakness in Eric's voice, Jennifer Aniston's voice softened. Eric, I think the distance between us is too far. The more time I spend with you, the more I realize that you're a drifting person. I don't want to feel insecure all the time. And I just bought a villa in Beverly Hills. But you don't have a home in your heart, Eric. Maybe it's just my imagination. I feel like you're just a passerby who suddenly barged into this world. When I'm with you, sometimes I can't help but worry that you'll suddenly disappear. The two of them clearly fell into a short silence at the same time. Eric, I called you today to tell you that I received an anonymous letter this morning. He wanted to meet me to talk about you. I saw that the address was in a public place in Central Park. It wasn't dangerous, so I went to meet him out of curiosity. That stranger asked me about you and me, and then asked me about what happened that morning. I didn't say anything, but that guy might have noticed something. And then he asked me if I was willing to testify against you and Drew. He even said that if this matter was successful, he would give me a sum of money, but I refused. Eric listened quietly to Jennifer Aniston's narration. His lips were tightly pursed. When Jennifer Aniston was done, Eric casually said, "And thank you for telling me all this. You still love me, right?" You. Anne's heart raced a few times, and her voice became a lot louder. Why are you still in the mood to talk about these things? Don't you understand, Eric? Someone wants to send you to prison. I specifically investigated Roman Polanski's case. There was indeed conclusive evidence that he had a relationship with that girl, but there were also people who wanted to target him and sentence him to life imprisonment. That was why he had no choice but to flee the United States. And I understand. Don't worry, I'll take care of this matter. After hanging up the phone, Eric sat quietly on the sofa and pondered for a long time. Although Home Alone had squeezed the box office of many movie companies, this was a normal business practice. Although many people would hate him, the most drastic method was the same as a few days ago, using the media to smear his name to suppress the box office of his movie. Moreover, after Fox's fierce counterattack, the other party quickly gave up after realizing that they couldn't do anything. Eric thought about it, and could only think of one person who would hate him to the point of wanting to send him to prison. Blunt Cohen. Because of the VM controversy, Blunt Cohen had been forced to apologize to him in public. For a person who had been in a high position for a long time, admitting defeat to a young boy who was about the same age as his grandson was definitely a disgrace. In addition, this person was not very broad-minded, so he was the most suspicious. However, it wasn't impossible for there to be other possibilities. Everyone knew that the human heart was the most unpredictable thing in the world. Even during this period of time, there were people who didn't like Eric and just happened to have the ability to do so. It wasn't impossible for them to take advantage of the situation to disgust him. Although he wasn't too worried, Eric still dialed Edward Lewis's number. More than half an hour later, the private lawyer came to Eric's house. Eric told him about what Jennifer Aniston had told him. The two discussed for a long time. Edward Lewis personally took notes and asked a lot of details. More than 2 hours later, Edward Lewis closed the notebook and asked with a solemn expression, "Eric, I want to confirm one last time. Can you guarantee that you didn't have sex with Miss Drew Barrymore that day? You have to know that yes and no need to prepare two completely different plans. If you didn't tell the truth, we are likely to be caught off guard by our opponents." Eric carefully recalled the situation at that time and said with certainty, "Absolutely not. Although we were in the same bed that day, the sheets were very clean. There were no traces of sex afterward. After that, Drew personally admitted that we didn't have sex." "Then I have no other questions. Eric, don't worry. I will prepare a response plan immediately when I go back. You don't have to worry about this matter at all. Although the public opinion is still somewhat unfavorable to you, in the absence of facts, even if someone wants to falsely accuse you, there is no possibility of success." Eric finally felt relieved. After sending Edward Lewis away, he suddenly remembered that when the storm had just started a few days ago, although Drew couldn't come to his house anymore, she would call him from time to time to say a few words. There was suddenly no news from her these 2 days. After calling Drew's house several times, no one answered. Eric had a bad feeling in his heart. He wasn't worried that Drew would team up with those people to frame him, but it was hard to say what Drew's greedy and not-so-smart mother would do. On the second floor of an apartment in Culver City, Los Angeles, Drew, who was locked in a room and watching TV, listened to the continuous ringing of the phone in the living room. She was a little irritated. Although Eric had never taken the initiative to contact her before, her sixth sense told her that the phone was probably Eric. In the past few days, Eriko Gide, who didn't care much about her, suddenly seemed to have a conscience and became a responsible mother. Using the storm in the media as an excuse, she grounded Drew in the room and didn't even allow her to make a phone call. Of course, Drew didn't agree. After arguing for a while, the mother and daughter almost came to blows. In the end, with her small arms and legs, Drew couldn't persuade Eriko Gide and was locked in the room. Moreover, Drew also sensed that someone was plotting something with her mother. Last night, she accidentally heard her mother whispering to someone on the other end of the phone in the living room for a long time. In the past, Eriko had never gone behind her back when she was on the phone. She wouldn't even lower her voice when flirting with some men on the phone. No, something must have happened. Drew turned off the TV and muttered to herself for a while. She walked around the room a few times uneasily. Looking at the time, her mother should be back soon. Drew felt that she couldn't wait any longer. After thinking about it, she found a few sheets in the closet and tied them together to make a 3 to 4 meter long rope. She tied it to the bed leg, tested the strength, opened the window, and carefully climbed down the rope. When she was about to hit the ground, the knot suddenly broke, and Drew fell from a height of 1 meter to the ground. She groaned in pain. Ignoring the bruises on her knees, Drew limped out of the yard and called a taxi to Eric's house. Chapter 48. The taxi stopped in front of Eric's villa, and Drew paid the driver and got off. The driver, who looked a little like Jordan, glanced at the bruise on Drew's knee and couldn't help but ask, "Miss Barrymore, do you need my help?" Drew shook her head. "Thank you, but it's fine." With that, he limped forward and rang the doorbell. The driver couldn't help but look at the high wall. Because the tabloids had been crazy recently, and there were several paparazzi's cars parked not far away, he quickly remembered that this was Eric Williams's house. However, that had nothing to do with a taxi driver like him. He shrugged and drove away. Hearing the familiar voice from the walkie-talkie, Drew finally felt the pain in her knee and wanted to cry. Only in front of Eric did she have the chance to act like a soft little girl, because he was the only one who cared about her. "Eric, it's me," Drew said into the walkie-talkie. "Drew, wait a moment. I'll be right there." After a while, the door opened. Seeing Drew in a sorry state, Eric hurriedly let the girl in and closed the door. He asked with concern, "Drew, what's wrong with you? How did your leg get hurt like this?" Drew sounded a little aggrieved. "I don't know what's wrong with my mother. She locked me in the house and wouldn't let me out. I could only climb down from the second floor and fell." Eric quickly figured out that Drew's mother was really crazy, but he wasn't in a hurry to say it. He crouched down and examined the girl, only to find that there were some bruises and scratches on the surface. "Let's go inside. I'll treat it for you." Drew grunted softly and couldn't help but pull Eric's sleeve as she limped forward. Eric glanced at the girl's appearance and sighed softly. He bent over and picked up the girl, walking towards the villa. On the sofa in the living room, Eric found a first aid kit and cleaned Drew's wound. He didn't stop talking. "Don't do this again. It's very dangerous. Fortunately, it's only a minor injury this time. Although your mother..." Eric suddenly didn't know how to evaluate Drew's mother. He could only vaguely skip over the topic and continue. "She won't do anything to you." Drew stretched out his legs and allowed Eric to work on it. After a while, he suddenly asked, "Eric, did something happen?" Eric paused in his action of wrapping the bandage and said, "You can tell." Drew nodded. "I feel that my mother has been strange these days. Not only did she secretly make phone calls behind my back, but she also locked me in the room abnormally, saying that it was for my own good. It's not like the newspapers haven't reported about me taking drugs and drinking before, but she never did that." Eric tied a knot on the bandage on Drew's knee and put it back in the first aid kit. "I don't know how to explain this to you." Drew didn't say anything. She looked at Eric with some uneasiness and quietly waited for him to continue. She clearly understood that this matter was caused by her. "At noon and called me from New York. She said that someone wanted her to testify against me. That I had sex with you." Drew was a smart person. With just one sentence from Eric, she quickly figured out the ins and outs of the matter. Drew stood up with a whoosh. Her face was filled with sadness and anger. Her voice was a little hysterical. It's her, it must be her. I was wondering why she was acting so sneakily these days. She even locked me in the house and said that it was for my own good. When has she ever really been for my own good? I want to cut off my mother-daughter relationship with her. This be *TCH. Drew, don't be like this. Eric's Asian mindset made him quickly stop Drew from saying more vicious words. Girl, no matter what other people say about your mother, you can't scold her. Although she's not very qualified, she's still your mother. Seeing Eric's serious expression, Drew knew that if she really scolded him, he would definitely be angry. Although when she quarreled with her mother at home, both sides could spew out all kinds of profanities. But since Eric felt that something was wrong, then it must be wrong. I'm sorry, Eric. The girl weakly apologized. Okay, Drew. Eric gently pulled the girl into his arms and hugged her. Actually, there must be someone else behind this. Otherwise, your mother definitely wouldn't do this. Because sending me to prison won't do her much good. I'm sorry, Eric, that she must have received money. She has already squandered my salary from back to 17. Is there anything I can do for you? Don't apologize, Drew. This has nothing to do with you. I've already asked Edward to make some preparations. You don't have to get involved in this anymore. You're still young. The two chatted for a while. Eric looked at the sky outside. The setting sun burned half of the sky red. Drew, you rest for a while. I'll go make dinner. What do you want to eat? Pizza, steak, spaghetti. Drew didn't have any intention of being polite. She wanted to continue, but Eric knocked on her head. I can't make any of those. I'll just order takeout. Also, if you keep eating these things, aren't you afraid that you'll become a fat girl in the future? I'm not afraid. Don't you like fat girls? Drew giggled. Eric had just picked up the phone when the doorbell rang. Eric took the opportunity to pass the phone to Drew. You call, I'll go take a look. Drew agreed and took the phone. She flipped open the thick phone book next to her and looked for the number of the takeout restaurant. Eric walked to the door and spoke into the phone. A man's voice came from the other side. Mr. Williams, I'm an LAPD officer. Opening the door, a fat white police officer and a woman in her 30s were standing outside. Just by looking at her appearance, Eric roughly guessed her identity, because this woman looked very similar to Drew. The white police officer's face was filled with obvious reluctance. Although the young man in front of him was young, his reputation wasn't very good recently. But after all, he was a person of high status. He really didn't want to get involved in this kind of *T, but he couldn't refuse the woman beside him. Otherwise he would be reported. Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Matt Bryson. The white police officer reached out and shook Eric's hand. Then he said somewhat awkwardly, This is Ms. Ediko Marco. She said that you abducted her daughter. Eric frowned and sharply looked at Ediko. The woman in front of him saw Eric looking over and slightly raised her head. She wanted to show off a bit of arrogance, but under Eric's slightly oppressive aura, her eyes slightly flickered. Maybe it was because she herself wasn't sure if Drew was with Eric, so she didn't seem confident. Drew is with me, but I didn't abduct her. She came here on her own. Ms. Ediko, I think we need to talk. Ediko saw that Eric unexpectedly took the initiative to admit it. Her aura was like a deflated balloon that was instantly inflated. What else is there to talk about? Hurry up and hand over my daughter. I want to take her back. Eric's face darkened and said, Ms. Marco, please watch your words. Right now there is a police officer here. Just based on what you said, I can sue you for slander, and the evidence is conclusive. Ediko's neck shrunk a bit. She looked at the police officer next to her with a pleading look. Eric took the initiative to speak to the police officer. Mr. Bryson, I'll have to trouble you to come here personally. The matter isn't as serious as Ms. Marco said. Drew and I are good friends. It's normal for her to come to my house in the afternoon, isn't it? Maybe Ms. Ediko's reaction was a bit too extreme. So if there's nothing else, you can leave. We can talk about it in private. Matt Bryson also didn't like the woman beside him. After hearing Eric's words, he went along with it and said, "Then that's it. Mr. Williams, Ms. Jeed Marco, I'll take my leave first. Mr. Bryson, you can't do this." Etiko obviously didn't want to face Eric alone. She went up to Matt Bryson and continued to pester him. Matt Bryson shook off Etiko's hand and said, "Ms. Jeed Marco, the matter is very clear. Your daughter came to Mr. Williams' house to play. If you continue to pester him, I'll sue you for obstructing official business." Watching Matt Bryson drive away in the police car, Etiko lost her biggest support. She didn't have the confidence to face Eric again. Although Eric was just a young man who had just come of age, no matter what society, wealth, status, and other factors would bring about a natural sense of oppression. Although Etiko had a child star daughter, she could barely be considered a middle-class woman. Plus, she had experience as a small actress. When facing a new director like Eric, she unconsciously felt inferior. Chapter 49. Please come in, Madame Marco. Eric let Edik in with an expressionless face. He closed the door and walked straight into the mansion. Edik quickened her steps and followed behind Eric. Her eyes couldn't help but look around the mansion. When she saw the luxurious modern mansion, her eyes were filled with envy. Although Drew was very famous, there weren't many roles that suited her due to her age. After acting in E.T., she had only acted in 4 or 5 movies. Moreover, the pay wasn't high. The money she earned wasn't enough for Edik to squander, let alone buy such a luxurious mansion. In the past 2 years, her daughter's self-awareness had become stronger and stronger. Their relationship had also worsened. Edik knew that it would be harder and harder to rely on her daughter to make money. Therefore, when someone tried to ask her to sue Eric, Edik only thought about it for a moment before agreeing. The other party promised her that as long as she signed the lawsuit in the name of Drew's guardian, she would receive a sum of money. She wouldn't even have to appear in court, and everything would be handed over to a lawyer. This was a good thing that practically fell from the sky. How could the greedy Edik let it go? When she pushed open the door and walked into the living room of the mansion, Drew, who was sitting on the sofa, turned her head. The smile on her face quickly melted like snow on a stove when she saw her mother. Her expression quickly changed a few times. In the end, Drew couldn't hold back the anger in her heart. She stood up, grabbed a pillow, and threw it at Edik. At the same time, she screamed, "What are you doing here?" The pillow missed its target. Eric quickly grabbed it and held it in his hand. He glared at Drew and said, "Drew, don't mess around." Although Edik didn't dare to be arrogant in front of Eric, she didn't have so many scruples in front of her daughter. She scolded, "You little bastard, how dare you throw things at me? Look at you now. I'm your mother. Of course, I'm here to take you home." How ironic. Drew waved his hand and pointed at Edik. "In the past, I didn't return home at night so many times. I even got drunk once. It was the police who picked me up from the roadside in the middle of the night and sent me home. Why didn't you come to find me then? Now you think you're my mother? Ha, what a joke." Eddie retorted, "Isn't that because you didn't listen? If you had stayed at home obediently, would that have happened? Also, what's going on at home? Don't you know that you've ruined a few of our hospital bills? Don't they cost money? Come back with me. I'll deal with you when we get home." Edik said as he walked forward to pull Drew away. Eric frowned when he heard Edik's words. The white bandage on Drew's knee was so obvious, yet Edik ignored it. Instead, he fussed over a few wounds. This made Eric feel a deep sense of disgust. Drew walked around the sofa, dodging her mother's hand, and shouted, "Don't even think about it. I won't go back with you. I already know what you're going to do. I love Eric, but you're framing him with others for money. I'll never forgive you. I'm going to break off our mother-daughter relationship." "You? What nonsense are you talking about?" Edik, who was suddenly exposed, was stunned. He looked at Eric guiltily and didn't know what to do. Drew looked at her stunned mother and sneered, "What's wrong? Are you feeling guilty now that I've exposed you? Let's not talk about the fact that Eric and I didn't have sex. Even if we did, I won't admit it. If you dare to sue Eric, I'll prove that you're framing him. You can just wait to go to jail." Seeing that Drew was about to say something even worse, Eric quickly stopped her and said, "That's enough. Drew, go upstairs first. I want to talk to your mother alone." Drew glared at Edith and snorted again. She turned around and walked up the stairs. "Please take a seat, Madame Marco. Let's talk." Eric put the pillow back on the sofa and sat down. Edith lowered her head slightly and sat across from Eric. After hearing her daughter's words, she suddenly felt that the money wasn't that easy to get. Originally, Edith thought that Drew's relationship with Eric would be the same as Drew's bad friends. When the time came, all he needed to do was to persuade Drew. And with the lure of money, Drew would agree to testify against Eric. But Drew's reaction just now made Edith realize that his daughter had fallen in love with the man in front of him, and she was unable to extricate herself from him. In the past, when the mother and daughter quarreled, Drew had never said anything as harsh as breaking off their mother-daughter relationship. More importantly, even if she sued Eric and lost the case, Edith didn't think that she would lose anything. However, Drew just said that she was going to testify against Eric. This crime could be light or heavy, but with this young man's wealth and status, would he let her go so easily? Thinking of this, Edith couldn't help but shiver. Seeing that Edith was in a dilemma, Eric sneered and asked, "Then, Madame Marco, you heard what Drew just said. Are you still going to do this?" Edith was silent. "Okay, I'll say it. Maybe the other party gave you a sum of money, but I'm not that easy to bully. Just like what Drew said, this is a false accusation. I can turn around and send you to prison. The people who instigated you to do this stupid thing will definitely abandon you. After that, Drew will become an adult. Because of resentment, she might cut off your relationship with her. Do you know what this means?" On the other side, Edith nodded subconsciously, but then he quickly shook his head. Eric continued, "This means that your most important source of income will be completely cut off. From what I know, you don't have any means to make a living. It's very likely that you'll spend the rest of your life in poverty. You might even end up in the slums of Los Angeles." Edith thought of that terrifying scene and refuted, "No, that's impossible. She can't do that to me. I raised her." "So what? After all these years, did Drew not make enough money for you? She doesn't owe you anything. Even if you spread this to the media, with what you've done, not many people will sympathize with you." Edith was speechless again. Eric let her calm down for a while before asking, "Did you take their money?" Edith shook her head weakly. "They said that they would only give me the money after I signed the lawsuit." Eric nodded with satisfaction. "That's good. Everything can still be salvaged. So now, I'll give you another choice. Go back and immediately reject those people. I'll give you a sum of money first, but you have to promise not to disturb Drew in the future. I'll find her a manager to take care of her life. When Drew becomes an adult, I'll convince her to give you a sum of alimony every year. It'll be enough for you to live a decent middle-class life." After Eric finished speaking, he took out a checkbook. After filling in the amount, he pushed it in front of Edith. Edith looked up and glanced at the amount on the check. Her eyes flashed with greed. She reached out her hand, but quickly withdrew it. Greed was not enough. "Mr. Williams, isn't 1 million too little?" Eric snorted. "It is indeed a little. Maybe I should change it to a check for 500,000. Edith quickly grabbed the check and put it in her pocket. "Okay, since you've already made your choice, then I have a few more things to say. First, you can't use Drew's name to make money anymore. You can't reveal Drew's private life to reporters, you can't go on TV, and you can't write a book about Drew. I'll get my private lawyer to draft a legally binding contract. If you break the contract, then everything I've said today will no longer count. Also, you have to spit out all the money you've received." Edith quickly calculated the pros and cons. The things Eric said didn't seem to bring her much money, so she quickly nodded. "Then, Ms. Edith, you can leave now. I'll get my lawyer to draft the contract as soon as possible." Edith smiled and said his goodbyes. He didn't pay any more attention to Drew and hurriedly left. After sending Edith off, Lujo returned to the living room. Drew had already come downstairs. When she saw Eric, she rushed over with a little excitement on her face. She rubbed against Eric and said, "Eric, you're so generous. 1 million. Eric rubbed Drew's head and smiled. "You're still yourself. But remember, girl, you owe me 1 million USD. You'll have to pay it back in the future, Drew shamelessly said. I'm not paying it back. I've decided to use myself as collateral. Eric knocked Drew's head. Don't talk nonsense. Did you call for takeout just now? I did. Drew said. Eric, why did you ask me to give her a sum of money every year? I don't want to care about her. It's better if she dies from poverty. Eric sighed and rubbed the girl's head. Drew was only 13 or 14 years old after all. It was inevitable that her thoughts were a little extreme. She didn't understand that there was only one set of rules in the world. She couldn't just do whatever she wanted. In Lu Zhou's previous life, even though Drew had cut ties with her father, she would still give him a sum of money every year. Drew was mature at that time. You'll understand in the future, Drew. This is a type of fate. In a person's life, there are a lot of things that can't be avoided. Drew nodded. She didn't fully understand, but she quickly became excited. Eric, can I live in your house in the future? Eric shook his head. Drew, it's time for you to go back to school. I'm going to choose a boarding school for you. After so many things have happened, how long has it been since you went to class? No, Eric. My head hurts when I see books. Can I continue to make movies? No, Eric refused. You have to at least finish high school. Whether you like it or not, it's an experience. Also, you're at an awkward age now. There aren't many movies that are suitable for you. Okay, I'll listen to you. Drew quickly followed Eric's arrangement. At the same time, she was thinking about how she could skip classes. Chapter 50. The takeout arrived quickly. By the time they finished dinner, the sky was completely dark. After watching TV on the sofa for a while, Eric took Drew upstairs to prepare a bedroom for her. Eric, I want to sleep with you. Drew pouted and took the quilt that Eric took out from the cupboard and hugged it in his arms. Eric patted a pillow and said, Stop messing around, Drew. You don't want me to get into trouble again, right? But this is your house. Who would know? You forgot what happened last time so quickly. If you didn't mess around, there wouldn't be so much trouble. Okay, come with me. Drew reluctantly followed Eric to a spare bedroom. Here, there's hot water in the bathroom. Oh, I forgot you can't shower. That's it. Sleep early. After explaining, Eric left Drew's bedroom and walked to the study room. After writing a few pages of the Resident Evil novel, Eric stretched and took out a pack of cigarettes from the drawer. He walked to the balcony and looked up. All of Los Angeles was shrouded in bright lights. He sat down on a deck chair on the balcony and lit a cigarette. Eric leaned back in the chair and inexplicably remembered what Jennifer Aniston said on the phone at noon. Do I really look like a passerby? There was a slight noise behind him. He turned around and saw Drew, who was wearing one of Eric's oversized t-shirts. She tiptoed and quietly walked over like a cat. When Eric saw her, she stuck out her tongue cutely. Eric, I can't sleep. Drew came over and pushed Eric to the other side of the spacious deck chair. She then laid down and rested her head on Eric's arm. She grabbed the cigarette from Eric's hand and skillfully took a puff. She blew a smoke bubble and frowned slightly before giving the cigarette back to Eric. It doesn't smell like that, okay? Eric played with the cigarette and asked with a smile. Of course. Drew replied matter-of-factly. Don't touch those things in the future. Eric patted the girl's shoulder. Okay. The nights in Los Angeles were very cold during this season. Eric was fine, but Drew was only wearing a t-shirt and her legs were bare. Eric took 2 more puffs and threw the cigarette into the trash can. He turned around and pulled out a blanket from the side to cover the two of them. Eric, what were you thinking? Drew tilted her head and asked curiously. Eric carefully covered Drew and said, I was thinking about Anne, where she is in New York. Actually, Drew hesitated and said, I know. Yeah. Didn't I promise you that I would explain to Jennifer Aniston what happened that day? I asked some people and got her contact information. She lives in Manhattan now. I don't remember the specific address, but I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I'll give it to you tomorrow. Eric smiled and said, Why are you giving it to me? I want to make you happy. Good girl. Drew took advantage of the opportunity and said, Is there a reward? Shouldn't you at least give me a kiss? As he spoke, he moved his tender face closer. Eric kissed Drew's face gently. Eric, can you sing? Can you sing a song for me? Eric didn't refuse. He patted Drew's shoulder and said, Good cat, warm cat, little fluffy ball. Ha, I don't want to listen to children's songs. Drew smiled and scratched Eric. She suddenly thought of something and got out of the blanket and walked into the house. After a while, she came back with a wooden guitar in her hand. This thing is hanging on the wall of my bedroom. Eric, can you play the guitar? Eric took it and tried a few tunes. No, this was left by the previous owner. Try it. I want to hear it. Drew acted coquettishly and got back into the blanket again. Eric had to sit up and put the guitar on his lap. He tried to strum a few times. Looking at the brilliant lights at the foot of Beverly Hills, he thought for a few seconds and said softly, On the window of the Boeing 727, your tearful eyes are reflected. Overlooking the city, everything was so faint that it was almost invisible. When the setting sun turns Hell's Kitchen into heaven, you turn your face away. I lift a strand of messy hair beside your ear. I say, everything will be fine. As long as we are together, forever and ever. As long as we are together, forever and ever. Eric had already forgotten some of the guitar skills he learned in college. He just played according to his feelings. His slightly hoarse voice drifted in the night wind, creating an inexplicable feeling. After the song, Drew narrowed her eyes and savored the aftertaste for a while. Then she said, Eric, will we be together forever? Putting the guitar aside, Eric lay back down again. Jennifer Aniston's words appeared in his mind. He thought about his experience of inexplicably coming to this world after drinking. Who knows, maybe when I wake up, I'll be dead. Drew pulled Eric's arm over and used it as a pillow. She gently rubbed against it and said, If you die, I'll be with you. Eric smiled and said, Then that's romantic. According to the Western tradition, maybe our story will be made into a poignant love story. Then it will be arranged into a play like Eric and Drew. Year after year, it will be performed in the theater. But if it is in the Eastern story, we will be a pair of unyielding man and woman courageously pursuing love. In the end, we will turn into a pair of butterflies, flying together. The infatuated man and the resentful woman will cry over our story again and again. The old-fashioned parents will teach their rebellious children. If you dare to mess around, be careful of turning into butterflies. Haha. Drew chuckled and said, Eric, after hearing you say that, I can't help but want to kill you and then kill myself. That way, in people's stories, we can be together forever. Eric knocked Drew's head and said, If you really do that, our story will most likely become a bizarre murder case in the police archives. Drew as usual rubbed his head in protest. The two of them quietly leaned against each other for a while. The girl once again tried to find something to talk about. Eric, what is your dream? Why are you suddenly asking this? I'm just curious. Tell me. Eric changed his posture and said, I don't like the word dream. I like to use the word dream. Dreams are always boundless, but ideals have to be grounded. Then what is your dream? My dream? Eric muttered to himself for a while and said in a very unpleasant manner, Dating a bunch of female stars, giving birth to a bunch of child stars, and becoming a legend in the film industry. Does that count? Drew raised his head and lightly hammered Eric's arm with the back of his head. He laughed and said, How vulgar. Okay, it's late. Go to sleep. How about sleeping here? You'll catch a cold. Then carry me back. Drew raised her arms and wrapped them around Eric's neck. Eric helplessly stood up and reached out to carry Drew. Just as he straightened his back, he suddenly seemed to lose all his strength and sank down. He said, Oh, you're so heavy. I'm old. I can't carry you anymore. You're so annoying. Drew, who was startled, laughed and hit Eric. However, she tightly held onto Eric's neck and refused to let go. Eric had no choice but to carry the girl to her bedroom. Chapter 51. What? That woman suddenly refused? Didn't you tell me that you had already reached an agreement? In a villa in Malibu, Blunt Cohen had just woken up when an assistant came to visit him in a hurry. At the same time, he brought bad news. Mr. Cohen, we had indeed reached an agreement at the beginning. However, when we contacted her last night, that woman suddenly went back on her word. Blunt Cohen's good mood for the day was completely ruined. He frowned. Did she think that the money was too little and that she could have increased it? The assistant shook his head. No, I also tried to sound her out. The other party rejected me very thoroughly. I think it might be because she had reached another agreement with Eric Williams in private. As the assistant spoke, he took out a newspaper and handed it to Blunt Cohen. Blunt Cohen only glanced at it. The newspaper had pictures of Drew Barrymore and his mother, Edith, appearing separately at the entrance of Eric's mansion. Blunt Cohen didn't read the content. He couldn't be bothered with the paparazzi's nonsense. He threw the newspaper on the table and muttered to himself for a while. You weren't recognized when you were in contact with the other party, right? If Drew's mother had reached an agreement with Eric, that woman would very likely reveal information about the person who had instigated her to do those things. Blunt Cohen knew that he wasn't a broad-minded person, but at the same time, he also knew that Eric Williams wasn't easy to get along with. If his scheme was discovered by the other party, who knew what kind of trouble it would cause? He wasn't going to treat Eric like an ordinary teenager anymore. The assistant hurriedly shook his head. Of course not, Mr. Cohen. I didn't have any direct contact with the other party. Furthermore, the person I found was very well spoken. He definitely wouldn't reveal any information about us. That's good. Blunt Cohen hesitated unwillingly for a moment before continuing. Let's leave this matter at that for the time being. The assistant bowed and suggested in a fawning manner, Mr. Cohen, actually, we can still use other methods. We don't have to go through Drew Barrymore's mother. Blunt Cohen waved his hand. That's enough. I said, let's leave this matter at that for the time being. The assistant saw the displeasure on Blunt Cohen's face and quickly shut his mouth. If it had been in the past, Blunt Cohen definitely wouldn't have let the matter rest. Eric had embarrassed him greatly. If he didn't get his revenge, it would be very difficult for him to release the depression in his heart. But now, there was a more important problem bothering him. During this period of time, Japan's Sony consortium had successfully acquired CBS Records and started to contact Coca-Cola's board of directors frequently. They wanted to continue to acquire Columbia TriStar Pictures. Due to the recent turmoil, Blunt Cohen, who had spent a great deal of effort to barely stabilize the situation, could no longer sit still. If the owner of Columbia was still Coca-Cola, with his many years of connections, he could continue to be in this position for a few more years, or even until he retired. However, if the owner of Columbia was changed to the Japanese, they would not have any relationship with him. Although Blunt Cohen was headstrong and self-opinionated, he still had some self-awareness of his own abilities. He knew that if the Japanese got their way, his fate would be obvious. Therefore, Blunt Cohen had no choice but to gather some of the forces that opposed the sale of Columbia, and use various methods to prevent Coca-Cola's board of directors from approving the sale of Columbia. Blunt Cohen even had to use the box office card of The Kid in the Home, which had always been a taboo. After all, although Columbia would lose a lot of money because of the VM, The Kid in the Home was the only good result Columbia had in the past few years. Blunt Cohen rubbed his temples and looked up to his assistant. Oh yes, I have an appointment with Mr. Trevor from Coca-Cola's board of directors for lunch. I remember that he likes Latin beauties. Go and contact a few Latin actresses to accompany him. Remember, they must be beautiful. The assistant was obviously used to this kind of thing. He quickly nodded and said, Okay, Mr. Cohen. I will do it now. Eric, why are you only here now? Capel Sid has been waiting for half an hour. When Eric appeared, Jeffrey Hansen couldn't help but complain. Eric said apologetically, I'm really sorry, Jeffrey. There was a traffic jam on the way. Okay, let's not talk about this. Let's go in. Because the film company's office building was still under renovation, Eric had to arrange to meet Capel Sid in a coffee shop to discuss the acquisition of his management company. Capel Sid was a white man in his 40s. He was as tall as many Westerners, at least 1.9 meters. He was bald and had a beard on his face. Eric came to Capel and extended his hand. I'm sorry, Mr. Sid. I'm late. Capel Sid didn't show any displeasure. Even though he was unhappy that Eric was late, he still smiled and said, "Hello, Eric. Do you mind if I call you that?" "Of course not, Capel. Please take a seat." Eric changed the way he addressed Capel. Said, "Eric, I've seen your deeds. From publishing Jurassic Park, promoting the script for Back to 17, and filming Home Alone to the final VM agreement. All these things have been carefully considered. Step by step, they are all interconnected. So you must be a smart and rational person. So, why did you choose me out of so many management companies?" "I originally planned to sell my management company and continue to develop in Europe, but Jeffrey said you wanted me to stay. You should know my situation. My conflict with Michael Ovitz has made it difficult for me to move forward in this industry," Eric said seriously, "because I'm not afraid of CAA. Perhaps other film companies have no choice but to bow down to CAA because they have a lot of top superstars, but I don't have to consider that. CAA has superstars, but I can create superstars. What I need is someone who can be the manager of a superstar, like you. Not a second or third-rate management company." When Capel heard Eric's words, he shook his head and smiled. "Eric, I'm surprised by your confidence. If I didn't have enough confidence, I wouldn't be where I am now." When Capel thought about the miraculous agreement, he nodded his head helplessly and said, "Eric, superstars aren't easy to nurture. I've worked at CAA for many years, so I'm well aware that behind every superstar in Hollywood, there needs to be a top team and a lot of hard work." Eric interrupted Capel's explanation and asked, "Do you think Stuart Runkle is a superstar now?" Capel obviously knew about the young lead in Home Alone, so he said, "Of course. He can be considered the top child actor in Hollywood. There isn't another one." "In that case," Eric asked, "if I produce another popular film like Home Alone and you control the lead role, do you think you have the ability to turn it into a top Hollywood superstar?" "Of course. But Eric, this assumption is meaningless. The success of Home Alone is very difficult to replicate. You can say it's all luck. How do you know if you don't try?" As Eric spoke, he raised his arms and placed them on the table. He crossed his fingers and said with some doubt, "Kapoor, why do I feel a little strange? As a seller, shouldn't you be working hard to promote your company? But why do I feel like you're not promoting? You're rejecting?" Capel shrugged. "Eric, I'm a manager, not an unscrupulous businessman. I hope we can be honest with each other. Also, I just want to sell the company in my hands and find a better place for my subordinates who still insist on staying in the company. I don't plan on staying. When you were a manager, were you this honest when negotiating with film companies on behalf of clients?" Capel quickly shook his head. "Of course not. I will definitely do everything in my power to fight for more benefits for my clients. Eric, these are two different things." "Then I have no other questions. Capel, my condition for buying your agency is that you must stay. Otherwise, the remaining second and third-rate managers won't be of much use to me. It looks like I have no other choice." Eric nodded his head firmly. Capel sipped his coffee and thought for a moment. In the end, he agreed. At the same time, he was a little expectant. Perhaps this young man could continue to create miracles. Chapter 52. Capel Sid agreed, and the two sides began to discuss the acquisition plan. In Eric's opinion, the most valuable person in Sid's agency was Capel Sid himself. Although Capel wasn't one of the founding five of CAA, his ability wasn't much worse than theirs. The remaining 7 or 8 agents and 20 or so actors in the agency were basically worthless, at least not before Eric acquired them. It wasn't that Sid's agency didn't have top-notch actors, but because of Michael Ovitz, a few well-known actors had no choice but to leave after a period of time. In the end, those who stayed were simply unable to find a better way out. After all, Capel was still very capable. Although it was difficult for his actors to make a name for themselves under CAA's shadow, they were still able to get roles in independent movies or TV series. "Eric, $1 million is very difficult for me to accept." Capel was somewhat dissatisfied with Eric's offer. When he was at CAA, his annual salary was more than $1 million. Eric said unhurriedly, "Capel, The only valuable things in your agency are the contracts of those 20 or so actors. They don't mean much to me. If I want, I can find a few hundred actors of that level at any time. Capel retorted. Eric, they're all outstanding actors. After being an agent for so many years, my judgment definitely isn't bad. They just lack opportunities. All the actors struggling at the bottom of Hollywood just lack opportunities. Capel, that $1 million is all from me. And I've also left you with 10% of the shares. I believe that in a few years, you'll definitely realize that you've gained a great deal. As for them, what I can give them is the opportunity they've been dreaming of. Capel knew that Eric was telling the truth, so he sighed and nodded slightly. Since they had already reached an agreement, the two sides quickly signed the contract. The agency had changed owners, so the name had to be changed. Eric unscrupulously used the name United Elite Agency and abbreviated it to UTA. It was one of the top 5 agencies in Hollywood alongside CAA, WMA, and other giants in his previous life. However, UTA was only established in 1991. By the time he was done, it was already noon. After lunch, Eric followed Capel Sid to the Sid Agency's office in Burbank. Capel Sid had only rented a few offices here, which made him look very shabby. However, at this time, the office was crowded with people. They also knew that today was a special day for the brokerage company. When Eric saw the expectant faces of these agents and actors, he suddenly thought of a question. He simply nodded to everyone and pulled Jeffrey and Kapoor into a separate office. He asked, Kapoor, how much is your management company's commission right now? 6%. So little? Eric was a little surprised. Isn't it 10%? Jeffrey interrupted. Eric, that was a long time ago. Kapoor also explained. Ever since CAA broke this rule for the sake of competition, the agency's shares have been getting lower and lower. Especially for small brokerage companies like us, it's impossible for us to take 10%. Right now, only CAA and WMA have the confidence to take a 10% commission. After the rise of CAA, apart from the lower commission for the big stars, they've restored the 10% commission for the second and third-rate stars. Eric thought for a moment and said, change the agreement and increase the commission to 10%. Eric, isn't that a bit inappropriate? Before Kapoor could answer, Jeffrey couldn't help but object. Eric explained, if we don't change it now, when the brokerage company develops, increasing the commission will have a bigger impact. So, which one of you will announce it? Jeffrey and Kapoor glanced at each other before turning to look at Eric at the same time. Okay, I'll be the bad guy. I don't need to introduce myself. Everyone must know who I am. Now, I officially announce that I am the new owner of this brokerage company. The company's name is UTA. My next movie will start filming after the new year. As long as your image is suitable and you pass the audition, you will be given priority to get the role in the movie. Everyone knows about Home Alone. People like Stuart Runkle and Matthew Perry, who were originally unknown, have now become popular stars. Some other supporting actors who could only act in TV dramas have also successfully entered the big screen because of their roles in Home Alone. Seeing the undisguised joy on everyone's faces, Eric knew that he had laid the groundwork. He changed the topic and said, however, I'm a capitalist, not a philanthropist. I'm giving you opportunities that are hard to get in the past, and at the same time, I need to receive something in return. Therefore, the original contract of the company's actors will need to be revised and the commission will be increased to 10%. If anyone finds it unacceptable, they can choose to terminate the contract and leave. After Eric finished speaking, he turned around and returned to the office to give everyone some time to consider. He believed that as long as these people had a normal IQ, they wouldn't choose to leave at this time. In the office, Jeffrey and Kapoor were already discussing the preparations for Pretty Woman. Eric, Jeffrey said that you want to invite Sophie Marceau to be the female lead? Kapoor asked. Eric nodded. Yes, is there a problem? Kapoor said. If you want to start filming after the new year, I advise you to change the actress. Because I was originally going to Europe to develop, I've been paying attention to the news over there during this period. Sophie Marceau is currently filming Andrei Zolaski's new film. With Andre's filming progress, even if your Pretty Woman is released, he might not be able to finish filming. Eric recalled. According to the Time, Sophie was probably filming My Night is More Beautiful Than Your Day, which some people jokingly called an alien movie. The name was very beautiful, but the content was a little confusing. However, it was indeed Zolaski's usual style. Then let's use Julia Roberts. Kapoor, I hope that you can personally be Julia's manager. Jeffrey persuaded again. Eric, you should know that your movie can't fail. Now many people are waiting to see you make a fool of yourself, so it's better. Jeffrey, I know what you mean, but, Eric smiled and said, didn't you read the newspapers? With the fame accumulated from my previous 2 movies, even if the new movie turns out to be a pile of shit, I can still make money. So, as long as the movie's quality is good, it will be difficult for it to fail. Then, why don't we take this opportunity to groom an actress of our own? What if Julia Roberts doesn't act well? Eric's smile was strangely ambiguous. Don't worry, I will personally teach her. As Eric expected, none of the actors from the agency chose to leave. They all accepted the new contract proposal proposed by Eric. After dealing with these matters, Eric was about to drive home. Jeffrey walked up and sat in the front passenger seat. Eric, my car has been sent for maintenance. Can you give me a ride? No problem. On the road, Jeffrey asked with concern. Eric, you and Drew, what's going on? I saw in the newspapers today that she went to look for you again yesterday. It seems that her mother, Edith, also went to your house? Eric did not hide anything from Jeffrey and told him in detail what happened yesterday. This is good. Drew is a talented actress. But, are you going to let her stay at your house forever? You are not related to her by blood. If this continues, coupled with the media's hype, even if Drew's mother doesn't find trouble with you, the Child Protection Association will step in. After all, Drew is only 13 years old. Don't worry, I know this. I have already decided to send Drew to boarding school. That's good. Jeffrey nodded. Eric, you don't really have a Lolita complex, do you? The car that was moving steadily suddenly slowed down. The Chevrolet behind them was already close. When Eric stopped, the other party almost rear-ended him. Ignoring the cars on the road, the fat white man in the Chevrolet stuck his head out of the car window and started cursing. Eric calmed himself down and steered the steering wheel away from the Chevrolet behind. Jeffrey, other than her age, which part of Drew resembles Lolita? She was obviously a demon, a little fox that had cultivated for at least 500 years. Anyway, you have to know your limits. Jeffrey seemed to have confirmed Eric's Lolita tendencies. Chapter 53. Ever since the news of Drew spending the night at Eric's house broke out, the sales of many newspapers hyping this matter increased greatly. Therefore, during this period of time, the number of paparazzi around Eric didn't decrease. The day after the acquisition of the agency, the news quickly appeared in the newspapers. The Los Angeles Metropolitan News directly analyzed the matter. It's hard to understand why Eric Williams chose to acquire Capel Sid's agency. Although Capel Sid is an outstanding agent, he was kicked out of CAA because of his conflict with Michael Ovitz. It's difficult for him to move forward in the Hollywood agent circle. It's rumored that Capel Sid planned to sell the agency and go to Europe, but Eric Williams insisted that he stay. It seems that our young miracle director has been blinded by success. He doesn't know the serious consequences of angering a behemoth like CAA. The Hollywood Reporter, on the other hand, focused on the fact that Eric had increased his agency's commission. According to a contracted actor who changed his name to United Elite Agency, the first thing Eric Williams announced after taking over the company was to increase the agency's commission to the maximum value of 10% set by federal law. In the future, Eric Williams would definitely choose actors from his own agency first. If his works could maintain the level of Back to 17 or Home Alone, even if the commission was increased to 20%, it would be enough to make many actors eager to be famous scramble for it. But obviously, this assumption was impossible. Movies were like gambling, and no director could win all the time. Therefore, the author is sure that Eric Williams' new agency won't be able to survive a year. Other newspapers were also pessimistic about Eric's acquisition. Some reporters even sent an interview invitation to Michael Ovitz in order to make this matter as popular as possible. Michael Ovitz didn't refuse like before. Although he didn't appear personally, he asked his assistant to make a statement on his behalf. The general idea was that he was optimistic about the potential of the young director Eric Williams, and hoped that there was a possibility of cooperation between the two sides. This statement seemed normal, but the media gave a completely opposite interpretation. This was a subtle warning from the head of CAA to Eric Williams. As long as he was still involved with Capel Sid, there was no possibility of cooperation between the two sides. Of course, this was only the speculation of some media. Then Eric's second film, Pretty Woman, was announced through the media. The powerful paparazzi didn't take long to dig out the news that Eric was trying to invite Richard Gere to play the male lead. This made many paparazzi excited because Richard Gere was one of the artists signed by CAA, and was at a low point in his career. Under normal circumstances, he would 100% accept Eric's invitation. Therefore, if Richard Gere and Eric didn't cooperate, the speculation that CAA was going to ban Eric would be confirmed. Inside a newly renovated conference room of Firefly Film, Horner Willie was leisurely drinking coffee. He was one of CAA's top agents, and he also had another identity, Richard Gere's agent. This was why he was here today. The door of the conference room was pushed open, and Eric walked in. He smiled and extended his hand to Horner Willie. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Mr. Willie." "It's okay." Horner Willie stood up proudly and shook Eric's hand. He then quickly sat down. Eric frowned and sat down across from Horner Willie. He looked around the conference room and asked, "Mr. Willie, please ask why Mr. Richard Gere isn't here today. He's the main character of today's meeting, right?" Horner Willie shook his head and said, "Richard is busy with other things. He has given me full authority to handle this matter." Even though Eric had a hunch, he still asked politely, "Mr. Richard Gere should have read the script outline I sent him, right? What do you think?" Horner Willie said, "Mr. Williams, Richard is very satisfied with your script. It's just that the salary you offered is only $500,000. It's hard for him to accept. Richard's an officer and a gentleman, earned more than $100 million in North American box office." Eric sneered in his heart. "Another guy who thinks he's a newbie," he said. "Mr. Willie, I'm young, so I've never heard of an officer and a gentleman. May I ask when the movie was shot? I'll go back and look at the videotape." 1982, Horner Willie blurted out. When he saw Eric's mocking expression, Horner Willie realized that he had been fooled. The salary of a Hollywood movie star wasn't at its peak. The higher the box office, the higher the value of the star. Instead, it was calculated based on factors such as the box office, awards, and personal exposure of the films they had acted in recent years. An Officer and a Gentleman was Richard Gere's movie from 7 years ago. It basically didn't have any value as a reference for his current value. Before sending out the invitation, Eric had done a full understanding of Richard Gere's recent career situation. Richard Gere's movies in the past 3 years had all failed at the box office. His best action thriller, Merciless, only grossed $12 million at the box office. The most recent movie he acted in only earned $180,000 in box office. That's right, it was $180,000. The producer probably didn't even earn back the cost of the cameo. Therefore, Eric's offer of $500,000 was a bit high. "Okay, Mr. Horner, since you think it's too little, then tell me your conditions." Horner Willie's expression quickly returned to normal. He said, "Mr. Williams, actually, we can accept $500,000. However, you should know what your problem is. Mr. Ovitz isn't a stingy person. As long as Capel Sid leaves America, Mr. Ovitz won't target him anymore." Originally, this matter was already settled, but you acted on your own initiative and kept him here. This made Mr. Ovitz very embarrassed, so Eric sneered and said, "So you used our cooperation to threaten me and make me fire Capel, right? How laughable. You force someone to leave his own country and still shamelessly say that you're magnanimous." Mr. Williams. Horner Willie's expression also turned cold. Although you have some achievements, don't think too highly of yourself. In front of the huge CAA, you're just an ant. I hope you're a smart person and don't do such impulsive things. What if I insist on doing it? Then we'll be very sorry, Mr. Williams. Don't forget, Stuart Runkle, the lead of The Kid in the Home, is also an artist signed by CAA. If you go against CAA, don't even think about successfully filming the second part of The Kid in the Home. It seems that CAA has become so arrogant that they've forgotten their duty. Eric still had a sneer on his face. Don't forget, you're an agency. Everything you do has to put the interests of your clients first. Only then can you survive for a long time. Horner Willie retorted. Mr. Williams, you don't have to remind us of this. We've always done this. Even if we can't reach an agreement, Richard will still get the lead role in another movie as compensation. What CAA doesn't lack the least is high-quality movie projects. I hope that after Pretty Woman is released, Mr. Richard Gere will still feel that he's received enough compensation. Eric's tone had a hint of meaning. He stood up and said, Mr. Willie, there's no need for us to talk anymore. Please go back and tell Mr. Michael Ovitz that although there's no one in Hollywood that can't be replaced, but as long as there's an actor in CAA that I like, I'll continue to send out invitations and won't accept any of CAA's conditions. I hope you have the courage to continue to refuse. Horner Willie coldly looked at Eric. I also hope you won't regret today's decision. After that, he didn't intend to say anything else. He took his briefcase and left. Chapter 54. The door to the conference room was pushed open again. Jeffrey Hansen and Capel Sid walked in. When they saw Eric's gloomy face, they knew that the negotiation had failed. Capel knew that this matter definitely had something to do with him. Otherwise, the almost outdated Richard Gere wouldn't have pushed a film contract with such a popular director like Eric. Eric, why don't I resign and go to Europe? Although the European film industry is in a slump now, it's still easy for me to find a job with my ability. Eric stretched out his hand and rubbed his stiff face. No, I won't make any compromises. Capel, you just have to do your job well. By the way, have you signed the contract with Julia? What do you think of her? I went to see Julia Roberts in Modern Cinderella and talked to her for a while. To be honest, Eric, I don't think highly of her potential. This lady only received short-term acting training. Her acting skills are average, and her appearance isn't outstanding either. Capel's words became slower and slower. He looked at Eric's expression from time to time, and remembered that Julia Roberts was recommended by Eric. Coupled with the scandal that appeared in the newspaper, the relationship between the two was definitely not ordinary. He was a little worried that Eric would be unhappy if he said it so bluntly. However, after Capel finished speaking, Eric nodded in agreement. Actually, I think so too. Then why did you let her be the female lead? Jeffrey asked. He had always wanted Eric to change to a more famous female lead. Because I have a feeling that Julia will definitely be popular in America in the future. She will rush to the Oscars and become famous all over the world. Eric had just opened his mouth when he saw Jeffrey and Capel's faces show a "who are you kidding" expression at the same time. Eric smiled and changed his words. Okay, I'm just kidding. Actually, although beautiful woman has a beautiful woman in the name, it's impossible to find a girl who is too beautiful to act in. Julia's image is just right in my opinion. If the female lead is too beautiful, it's easy for the audience to shift their attention to the female lead's face and ignore the deeper theme of the movie. If in the future, the audience can only think of a beautiful face after watching the movie, that would be the failure of our movie. Jeffrey and Capel had already read the script of Beautiful Woman. After listening to Eric's analysis and combining it with the content of the script, they finally agreed with Eric's point of view. Now, the most important thing for us is to find a male lead. Eric looked at the two in front of him. Although I like Richard Gere the most, since he rejected me, we have to choose another actor. Do you have any good suggestions? What about Michael Douglas? Jeffrey was the first to suggest. In last year's Wall Street, Douglas played the role of a stock tycoon. Is it very similar to Edward's setting in Beautiful Woman? Eric had just recalled the movie Wall Street, when he heard Capel remind him softly. Eric Michael Douglas Agency is also CAA. The three of them were silent for a while before Eric said, Capel, you're a professional in this field. You can handle this matter. Quickly compile a list of suitable actors to play Edward and arrange an audition. We don't have much time. Capel nodded and said, No problem. If there's nothing else, I'll do it right away. After Eric nodded in response, Capel hurriedly left the meeting room. Watching Capel leave, Jeffrey sighed softly. Eric, do you really think it's worth it? You mean the bad relationship with CAA because of Capel? Jeffrey nodded. It doesn't matter if it's worth it or not. Jeffrey, my situation is different from others. You'll understand in the future. Maybe other film companies are afraid of falling out with a giant like CAA, but I don't have such scruples. I really don't understand where you get your confidence from. Jeffrey shook his head. Eric, you mentioned before about the sponsorship of the sports car in the movie. I contacted the Ferrari executives in Los Angeles. Originally, they readily agreed to provide us with sports cars for free. After understanding the content of the movie, they hesitated when they heard that the female lead was a prostitute. I think we should contact other sports car brands. No problem. Although Eric liked Ferrari, he didn't insist since the other party gave up on this promotional opportunity. Recalling Jeffrey's words, Eric suddenly thought of a problem. Jeffrey, you just said that they agreed to provide us with sports cars for free? Jeffrey didn't understand what Eric meant. He seriously thought about it and nodded. You didn't mention money? Jeffrey said, Eric, with your current fame, it's very easy to find a sports car brand to sponsor a movie for free. We don't need to give them money at all. I mean, Eric waved his right hand in distress. They're giving us money? Jeffrey was surprised. How is that possible? Product placement should have been around a long time ago. However, looking at Jeffrey's reaction, Eric understood that the concept of using product placement to increase movie income hadn't taken root in people's minds yet. In the era before he transmigrated, product placement in movies and TV series had reached a scale of more than $20 billion per year. Jeffrey, think about it. According to the script, the sports car in the movie will appear one after another in the first 20 minutes. There will even be a scene where the female lead introduces the performance of the sports car. This is equivalent to a 20-minute sports car commercial. Let's say my movie gets $100 million at the North American box office. That's equivalent to 10 million people watching this commercial. Coupled with the number of people watching the movie worldwide, and the number of people watching the movie after the release of the videotape, this number will be even larger. Even 10 or 20 years later, every time people watch this movie, they will still watch this sports car commercial. Do you understand how much of an advertising effect this will have? Jeffrey nodded thoughtfully. So organize what I just said and separately lobby the executives of the car companies. Remember, sponsorship less than $1 million is off the table. Eric, isn't $1 million too much? Also, what you just said is just a hypothesis. What if the movie doesn't do well? Eric said. This method is easy to solve. We can agree on a box office number with the other party. If the box office doesn't meet expectations, part of the sponsorship will be returned. Jeffrey pressed on. What if it exceeds the target? Eric said helplessly to this long-winded old man. Jeffrey, these specific details are for you to consider as the producer. I still have a lot of things to do. You can't make me worry about these things, right? As he said that, a staff member knocked on the office door and said, Mr. Williams, the clothes custom-made according to your sketches have been sent over. Do you want to see it for yourself? Okay, I'll be right there. Let Julia change first. Eric agreed and chatted with Jeffrey for a while before saying, Jeffrey, let's go and see the style I designed for Julia. After walking out of the well-soundproofed conference room, they heard faint knocking sounds. Some of the office rooms were still being renovated by workers. When they arrived at an audition room that was more than 30 square meters, Julia had already changed into the classic singlet, short skirt, and boots from Pretty Woman. She was wearing a red coat outside. Eric only took one look and frowned. Where's the wig? I remember specifically telling you before. It's in the changing room. Do I have to bring it now? Julia asked. Eric waved his hand. Hurry up and change. We still have to take the makeup photos later. Julia obediently walked into the changing room, and the female assistant named Allison, who had just been assigned to her by the agency, tactfully followed her in to help. Soon Julia walked out again. Not only was she wearing a blonde wig, but she also had a small black hat on her head. The moment she appeared, the eyes of everyone in the audition room couldn't help but light up. Against the backdrop of the wig, Julia's face was faintly stunning. If Julia's original appearance could only be given a 6 out of 10, now it was at least an 8 out of 10. When Eric saw Julia's appearance, he still felt that something was wrong. However, he simply instructed the photographer next to him to take some photos of Julia. After that, Eric said, "You can all leave. I'll talk to Julia." The staff members left one after another. Jeffrey also got up and said goodbye. After everyone left the audition room, Julia pinched the corner of her clothes and asked uneasily, "Eric, is there a problem? I saw that you've been frowning." Julia felt that what had happened in the past few days was like a dream. First, she was inexplicably coaxed into bed by Eric and received a ridiculous promise. For the next week, Eric didn't contact her again. Just when she was disappointed and thought that Eric's previous words were just to toy with her, he suddenly called her again. After hurriedly signing an agency contract, Eric threw a stack of scripts in front of her. "The female lead is yours. Don't disappoint me." Chapter 55. Eric didn't answer. He continued to sit on the sofa and stared at Julia for a long time. Julia made a nonchalant expression. A few minutes later, Eric finally spoke. Julia heaved a sigh of relief. When Eric was frowning and thinking, the oppressive aura emitted from his body made her a little breathless. After a while, she struck a pose according to Eric's request. She stared at the ground with a nonchalant expression. "Walk a few rounds." Eric stretched out his finger and gestured at the empty space in front of him. Julia walked according to Eric's instructions. "Okay, stop." Eric's tone was full of displeasure. "Julia, have you read the script seriously?" Julia quickly nodded. "Of course, I've memorized most of the lines." "Then you're Vivian now. Treat me as Edward and try to act." Seeing Eric sitting there with a lazy expression, coupled with the fact that Eric had just chased everyone out, Julia inexplicably thought of the rumor about the audition sofa. She almost blurted out her rejection, but in the end, she sighed in her heart and secretly comforted herself. "It's not like I haven't done it before." Julia took off her red coat and put it aside. Then she walked in front of Eric. After a while, Julia came out of the bathroom and said, "Mr. Williams, are you satisfied now?" "Of course." Eric smiled and looked at the girl who was pretending to be arrogant. He said, "However, Julia, you obviously misunderstood me. You." When Julia heard Eric's words, she was stunned. Her face turned red and white, and it quickly changed several times. Suddenly, she threw the tissue in her hand at Eric. "Then why didn't you stop me just now?" Eric laughed and dodged the tissue. He said, "I'm a normal man. How can I refuse such a thing?" "You bastard." Julia cursed, and an extremely embarrassed feeling surfaced in her heart. Her body went limp, and she sat on the ground. She buried her head in her arms and wept softly. Eric quickly stopped smiling and sighed. He walked to Julia's side and squatted down, patting the girl's shoulder. "Julia, don't cry. I was wrong just now. Do you think I'm cheap now?" Julia didn't stop crying as she asked in between sobs. "Of course not." Eric sat down next to Julia and pulled the girl into his arms. He comforted her. "You're just a little unconfident. Perhaps you've also noticed that Jeffrey and Kapoor don't think highly of you. This has given you a strong sense of danger. Julia, believe me, since I gave you the female lead role, I must have thought it through carefully. You have to know that there are a lot of people waiting to see my next movie fail at the box office." "Thank you, Eric. You working hard to film the movie well is the greatest thank you to me. Now let's talk about your problem." The two of them stood up together. Julia hurriedly touched up her makeup and sat down opposite Eric. "Now, Julia, I'll tell you where your biggest problem lies. In the script, Vivian is a prostitute, a very professional prostitute. So, before Edward modified her every move, every frown, every smile, and every word had to be in line with this profession. And through my observation just now, although this outfit makes you more beautiful, you don't have the flirtatious charm that Vivian should have. You're still the waitress in my previous impression. Julia thought about Eric's words. After Eric finished speaking, she said, "Eric, should I try again?" Eric shook his head. "No need, Julia. I'll give you a task now. From now on, go to the streets where the prostitutes appear every night and observe them. Try to imitate their words and actions. I'll go to New York during the Christmas period. When I come back, I'll give you a test. Wear this outfit at night and stand on the street with a lot of people. If there are less than 10 men hitting on you within an hour, you'll fail." Julia opened her mouth unconfidently. "Eric, 10 isn't that a little too much?" "It's settled then." Eric didn't give the girl a chance to bargain. "If your performance is too bad, I don't mind replacing you." Julia could only nod. Eric thought for a while and instructed, "When you do this, don't go to remote streets. Remember to bring your assistant. It's safer with 2 people." Julia's heart warmed. "Thank you, Eric." Richard Gere's refusal to act in Eric's new film was quickly exposed by people with ulterior motives. For a time, the newspaper's opinion that Eric had been blacklisted by CAA was rampant. Under the tireless pursuit of the paparazzi, CAA and Eric both argued that the two sides didn't cooperate because they couldn't agree on the pay and schedule. No matter what the truth was, neither side had the intention of letting the media hype it up. After all, it wasn't to the extent of falling out with each other. MGM's United Artists seized the opportunity to announce a new film. Richard Gere was going to act in an action drama film based on a true story, Mighty Dragon. United Artists originally planned to release the film in May, so they didn't plan to start shooting immediately. However, after CAA recommended Richard Gere as the male lead, MGM's United Artists felt that this was a good opportunity to use Eric's new film. They decisively decided to shoot the film in advance, and also confirmed the Easter schedule. Their intention to compete with Eric's new film was very obvious. The newspapers were abuzz. Barry Diller couldn't help but call Eric personally to ask about the situation. Although Fox had some expectations for Eric's new film, they were more concerned about the second part of The Kid in Charge. If CAA really blacklisted Eric's film company, the second part of The Kid in Charge would definitely be greatly hindered. "Don't worry, Mr. Diller. If this really happens at the end of the year, I will consider letting Fox produce the sequel. I'm sorry, I've been very busy recently. I'm afraid I don't have time. Okay, that's all. Goodbye." Eric put down the phone and looked at the thick stack of actor information in front of him. He looked up at Capel Sid, whose eyes were bloodshot. Eric comforted him. "Capel, you don't have to work so hard. No matter what, your health is the most important." Capel only used a little more than a day to find the details of dozens of actors that met Eric's requirements. Eric was touched. At the same time, Eric was sure that he didn't misjudge Capel. "Thank you for your concern, Eric. It's okay. I used to work on a film project and didn't sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Eric nodded. He opened the folder and looked through it carefully. Most of these actors were artists from William Morris Agency and International Innovation Management. Some of them were from small agencies, and some even didn't have an agency for the time being. Their relatives were their agents. As Eric flipped through the information, he pulled out the actors he liked and planned to contact them for auditions. Suddenly, Eric saw someone special. "Capel, Al Pacino's information says that he doesn't have an agency now. What's going on?" "That you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.